Between 1968 and 1998, one man lived completely alone in the remote Alaskan wilderness, building his own cabin with hand tools, fishing and foraging for his food, and facing the challenges of a stunning yet unforgiving environment. For 30 years, Dick Pronek documented his extraordinary life through journals and film, creating a remarkable record of self-reliance decades before social media, smartphones, or modern conveniences. Here's what life was really like for the man who turned his back on civilization to embrace the wild. Hey, quick thing before we start. If you actually listen to these regularly, hit like or subscribe. I always wonder where everyone's at, so comment your city and what time it is. Weird to think some of you are having breakfast in London while I'm recording this at night here in the States. Alright, tonight it's the Alaskan wilderness. But hold on, get comfortable first. I mean it. Fix your pillows, grab that blanket. This one's worth settling in for. Your eyes snap open to darkness. The bitter cold has seeped into your bones despite the layers of wool clothing. Your breath forms clouds in the frigid air of the small cabin. Outside, the wind howls, rattling the handmade window frames. It's May 1968, and you're Richard Proenecker, a 51-year-old retired mechanic who just made the most radical decision of your life. The temperature reads 20-degree nangs on the small thermometer nailed to the wall, not like your warm, climate-controlled bedroom right now. No, this is proper, bone-chilling cold that makes your teeth ache and your fingers stiffen. You've just arrived at Twin Lakes, Alaska, 200 miles from the nearest road, 30 minutes by float plane to the closest tiny settlement. Wait, you're thinking, who willingly chooses this? Well, funny thing, lots of us dream about escaping to the wilderness, living off the land, becoming self-sufficient, but almost nobody actually does it, and damn near nobody does it at 51 years old, alone, in one of the most unforgiving environments on the planet. But that's exactly what Dick did, and he didn't just survive, he thrived. Looking around the borrowed cabin in the pre-dawn light, you can make out your breath clouds floating in the weak beam of your headlamp. You've got exactly 1 year to prove you can do this. Build your own shelter, find your own food, and make it through a winter where temperatures regularly hit 50-degree mass, where the sun barely peeks over the horizon for months, where a simple mistake means death. Oh, and you're going to do it with no power tools, just your hands, a few basic tools, and whatever this land gives you. This is insane, you might think. And yeah, that's fair. But for Dick, this wasn't some macho survival challenge or midlife crisis. This was something deeper, a response to nearly dying from rheumatic fever during World War II, a disease that left him weak and helpless in a hospital bed. He'd promised himself then that if he recovered, he'd live differently, be stronger, more self-reliant, more connected to the natural world. It took 20 years, but here you are, standing at the edge of twin glacier-fed lakes, surrounded by mountains that look like they've never felt a human footprint, about to see if you can actually do it. You step outside, and the cold is like a physical slap. Your lungs burn with each breath. The silence is absolute, the kind of quiet that modern humans rarely experience. No traffic noise, no humming electronics, not even the distant sound of other people. Jesus, you whisper, and your voice sounds strange, muffled by the snow. The stars are impossibly bright overhead, like nothing you've ever seen in the city. The nearest electric light is 100 miles away, and it shows. Babe Allsworth, the bush pilot who dropped you off, had said he'd return with supplies in a few weeks, if weather permitted. If not, well, that's your problem now. You've got a borrowed cabin for now, but that's temporary. You need to build your own, and fast. The brief Alaskan summer, 3 months, maybe 4 if you're lucky, is your only window to get a proper shelter up before winter hits like a freight train. The morning you begin construction, you hike to a stand of spruce trees you'd scouted earlier. Picture this: no chainsaw, no power tools, nothing but an axe you've sharpened yourself. And these aren't skinny little trees. These are proper spruce, thick and tall. Each one takes almost an hour of constant muscle-burning work to fell. Okay, you tell yourself, swinging the axe. 1 down, about 40 more to go. The first hit sends shockwaves through your arms. By the 100th, your shoulders are on fire. By the time the tree finally groans and falls with a ground-shaking thud, you're drenched in sweat despite the cool air. And that's just the beginning. Each log needs to be stripped of bark, a tedious process that leaves your hands blistered and sticky with sap. Then they need to be hauled by you alone to your building site. This would be a hell of a lot easier with a truck, you mutter, using a system of log rollers to move the massive trunk inch by painful inch across the uneven ground. Each log weighs several hundred pounds. Each one takes most of a day to move into position. Modern construction uses power tools, cranes, teams of workers. You have none of that. Just your 2 hands, basic tools, and a body that reminds you daily that you're not a young man anymore. But here's where Dick's genius comes in. The cabin he designed wasn't just functional, it was a masterpiece of craftsmanship. Each log was notched with such precision that they fit together with barely a gap between them. The corners weren't just stacked, they were interlocked, using a saddle notch technique that required mathematical precision. He didn't just build a shelter, he created something beautiful. You spend hours with a hand tool he made himself, a curved adze, carefully shaping each log, your hands aching, your back screaming for rest. But there's no one to take over when you're tired. No shift change, just you. I wonder how many calories I'm burning, you think, as the pile of wood chips grows around your feet. Probably a few thousand today alone. The days blur together. Wake before dawn, work until your hands can't grip tools anymore, sleep like the dead, repeat. One morning, about a month in, a curious red squirrel watches your work from a nearby tree. He chatters angrily, clearly unimpressed with this human intrusion. "Oh, you're a noisy little guy, aren't you?" you say, surprised by the sound of your own voice after days of silence. "I think I'll call you Sam." And just like that, you've made your first neighbor. Sam the squirrel becomes a daily visitor, sometimes stealing small items when you're not looking, sometimes just watching with that weird intensity only wild animals have. Speaking of wild animals, let's talk about the bears, because Twin Lakes has them. Big ones. You're hauling water from the lake one evening when you feel it, that primal, hair-raising sensation of being watched. Slowly, you turn toward the tree line. And there it is, a grizzly bear, massive and silent, watching you from about 100 yards away. You freeze. Your heart hammers so hard you can feel it in your throat. The bear is enormous, maybe 800 pounds, all muscle and claw and teeth. It stands perfectly still, sizing you up. "Don't run," you remind yourself, even as every instinct screams at you to sprint for the cabin. That's the worst thing you can do. Instead, you slowly set down your water bucket and back away, making yourself look as non-threatening as possible. The bear watches, then casually turns and ambles away, apparently deciding you're not worth the trouble. Only when it's gone do your knees start shaking so badly you have to sit down right there on the stony beach. "Holy shit," you breathe. "That was close." And this is your new reality. You're not at the top of the food chain here. You're just another animal trying to survive. It's terrifying, but also strangely exhilarating. As summer progresses, your cabin walls rise higher. You've developed a rhythm now. The logs, once impossibly heavy, now feel manageable as your body adapts to this new life of constant physical labor. You develop clever solutions to problems most people never have to think about. How do you create perfectly straight lines without modern tools? You use the surface of the lake as a level. How do you lift heavy logs by yourself? You build a tripod hoist with a pulley system. Each challenge becomes a puzzle to solve, and there's deep satisfaction in figuring it out using nothing but your wits. The roof is the hardest part. You need to split long boards from logs using just a froe and a mallet, tools most people today wouldn't even recognize. Each board takes hours of painstaking work, and you need dozens of them. But slowly, impossibly, the cabin takes shape. By August, the walls are up. By September, the roof is on. You've built a stone fireplace that will be your only heat source through the coming winter. You create a door with wooden hinges you carved yourself, a window with a frame so precise it can be removed in summer for ventilation and replaced in winter for insulation, a bed frame, a table, all from materials you harvested yourself, shaped with your own hands. Standing back to look at your work, sweaty and exhausted but filled with a satisfaction few modern humans ever experience, you realize something profound. You've built more than a cabin. You've built independence. Babe's float plane buzzes overhead occasionally, bringing basic supplies you can't produce yourself. Flour, sugar, coffee, ammunition for your rifle. But more and more, you're providing your own food. You string a fishing line in the crystal clear lake and within minutes, pull out a fat lake trout. Its silver sides flash in the sunlight as it thrashes in your hands. Dinner, you murmur, already thinking about how to fillet it. You develop an eye for edible plants, blueberries that grow in profusion during the brief summer, wild onions, roots that supplement your diet. You learn to spot game trails, to move silently through the forest in search of ptarmigan and spruce grouse. One September morning, you're out with your rifle when you spot a young caribou at the tree line. Your shot is clean, and within hours you have meat hanging to cure, enough to last months if properly preserved. The waste bothers you. You hate killing more than you need. Unlike the sport hunters who occasionally fly in, shoot something, and leave most of the meat behind, you use everything. The hide becomes mittens, the sinew becomes thread, the bones become tools. Nothing wasted, you tell yourself, hands bloody as you work. Nothing taken without need. By October, the first snow dusts the mountains, and you feel a primal urgency to prepare. Winter in Alaska isn't just cold, it's an entity, a force that reshapes the entire landscape. You've got maybe a month before the lakes freeze solid, before the snow piles higher than your windows, before the true test begins. You split firewood until your arms feel like they're going to fall off, stacking it carefully against the cabin wall. You dig a cold cellar beneath your floor, using the natural refrigeration of the frozen ground to preserve your meat. You hang herbs to dry from the ceiling beams, fill containers with berries, smoke fish over slow fires. One night in late October, you crawl into your handmade bed in your handmade cabin, wrapped in blankets as the first real winter storm howls outside. The temperature has plummeted to 30 degrees Celsius. The wind screams like something alive, finding every tiny gap in your construction, sending ghostly whispers of cold air across your face. But inside, the fireplace you built stone by stone radiates heat. The walls you notched log by log keep out the worst of the elements. The roof you split board by board protects you from the driving snow. It's not perfect, it's not easy, but it's yours. Built by your hands, designed by your mind, a physical manifestation of human ingenuity and determination. As you drift towards sleep, the absolute silence broken only by the occasional pop from the fire, you think, I did it. I actually did it. And this is just the beginning. For Richard Proenica, this first year was simply the prologue to a 30-year odyssey of self-reliance. A man who walked away from modern convenience to prove that survival, real, meaningful survival, wasn't just possible. It was profoundly satisfying. Unlike your cozy bed right now, with its memory foam and temperature regulation, Dick slept on spruce boughs covered with basic blankets. Unlike your fully stocked refrigerator a few steps away, his next meal always depended on his skill and effort. Unlike your world of constant connection, his companions were the wild animals whose habits he came to know as intimately as we know our friends' social media profiles. And yet, as his journals reveal, he was never happier than in those 30 years of solitude, surrounded by a wilderness that was both deadly and breathtakingly beautiful, in a world that moves ever faster, that values convenience above experience. Dick Proenic's story reminds us of something essential we've almost forgotten: the deep satisfaction of doing difficult things with our own hands. The mountains around Twin Lakes still stand silent guard over his cabin. The lakes still freeze and thaw in their ancient rhythm. But something truly remarkable happened there. A modern man stepped away from modernity and found not hardship, but joy. And while you're drifting off in your comfortable bed, in your temperature-controlled room, with the world's knowledge a smartphone away, maybe part of you wonders what it would be like to build something real, to face true challenge, to live by your wits and your hands in a world that demands nothing less than everything you've got. Sleep tight. There's more to come tomorrow night. The sun doesn't really rise anymore. That's the first thing you notice as November deepens in Alaska. It just kind of smears across the horizon, a brief watery glow that barely qualifies as daylight, and then it's gone. 4 hours of dim twilight, then darkness again. You wake up at 5 a.m. out of habit, but the world outside is pitch black. The temperature inside your cabin reads 7 degrees. Outside, -28. The frozen air feels solid when you breathe it. The fireplace you built has gone cold overnight. Your breath forms thick clouds that hang in the air, refusing to disperse in the stillness. Sleeping was a battle of constantly shifting positions. When one side of your body started to freeze, you'd roll over to warm it with body heat trapped in the blankets beneath you. Not like your cushy mattress right now, with its even temperature and perfectly designed support. No, this is survival sleep, the kind where you're half awake all night, listening for sounds, feeding the fire, adding layers when the cold bites through your previous defenses. Right. Coffee first. Your voice sounds strange in the darkness, almost startling after days of silence. The words fall dead in the frigid air. First task, fire. You scrape away the ash to find a few embers still glowing weakly. Thank God. Starting from scratch in this cold would be a nightmare. You carefully add birch bark, then small twigs, nursing the tiny flame with your breath until it catches. Larger sticks next, then finally split logs. The routine is meditative. Precise. One mistake means starting over. The coffee pot is actually frozen solid. You set it near the growing fire to thaw while you pull on another layer of wool socks. Outside, the world is transformed. Twin Lakes has frozen completely, a massive expanse of white stretching between mountain ranges. The spruce trees are bent under the weight of snow, creating strange, hunched silhouettes in the darkness. Your snowshoes hang by the door. Essential equipment now, not optional. Without them, you'd sink to your waist with every step. The outhouse is 30 yards away, might as well be 30 miles in this cold. The trip is an Arctic expedition in miniature, requiring serious preparation. You bundle up in every layer you own: long underwear, wool pants, insulated coveralls, 2 pairs of socks, a heavy coat, mittens over gloves, a wool hat pulled down over your ears. And still, by the time you make it back inside, your face burns from exposure and your toes are numb. Note to self, you mutter, stomping your feet to restore circulation. Build the damn outhouse closer next time. Your breath thaws enough to drink the coffee, the first hot thing to enter your body in hours. The sensation is almost painful, a burning river flowing down your throat, pooling in your empty stomach. You sit at your small table as dawn finally begins to lighten the world outside. The window, that marvel of craftsmanship with its perfect seal and removable frame, is frosted over completely, transformed into a canvas of ice crystals. Using your thumbnail, you scratch a small circle to peer through. The thermometer mounted outside reads -35 now, cold enough that spit would freeze before it hit the ground, cold enough that your lungs ache with each breath, cold that doesn't just chill you, it actively hunts you, searching for any exposed skin, any gap in your defenses. The morning routine is dictated by necessity. Check the meat cache to make sure nothing's been disturbed by wildlife. Break ice for water. Split more firewood. You'll need a staggering amount to survive the winter. Maybe 6 cords total. That's a pile 8 feet long, 4 feet wide, and 4 feet tall. All split by hand, all carried on your back, log by log. Not like turning a thermostat up when you're cold at home. This heat is earned through sweat and blistered hands. By 9 a.m. you've been working for 4 hours and dawn has barely broken. You retreat to the cabin to warm up, your beard now a mass of ice from the condensation of your breath. The simple act of entering the cabin requires a ritual: stomping snow from your boots, brushing it from your clothes, hanging items to dry near the fire. Moisture is both essential and dangerous. You need it to live, but let it freeze in your clothes and it becomes a killer. You sit at your small table, the surface still marked with adze cuts from its creation, and open your journal, another daily ritual, recording everything: the temperature, the wildlife sightings, your activities, your thoughts. Someday these observations might matter to someone, but honestly, you're doing it for yourself, a way to process this strange, isolated life, a conversation when there's no one to talk to. November 17th, 1968. -35 at dawn, you write. Lake completely frozen now, 6 inches thick by the shore, solid enough to walk on. Spotted wolverine tracks near the North Ridge. Animal was dragging something heavy, probably scavenged kill. Firewood supply adequate, but we'll need to gather more before next storm. You pause, then add a more personal note. Silence absolute except for ice cracking on lake. Sound travels for miles. Feel like I can hear my own heartbeat sometimes. Odd sensation. The journal gives shape to days that would otherwise blend together. There's no weekend in the wilderness. No holidays. No social obligations to mark time. Just the rhythm of survival and the slow crawl of the sun across the horizon. Mid-morning, you spot movement outside your cleared viewing circle. A moose, massive and prehistoric-looking, trudging through snow that reaches its belly. Its breath forms clouds around its massive head. The animal moves with surprising grace despite its awkward form, picking a careful path along the frozen shoreline. You watch, entranced, as it stops to strip bark from a birch tree with its prehensile lips. These giants need to eat constantly to maintain their bulk, 50 pounds of vegetation daily. In winter, when food is scarce, they burn stored fat and slowly starve. By spring, many won't survive. This one looks healthy though, fat reserves still visible along its spine, good browse available near the shoreline where it can reach branches without sinking too deep in snow. You could shoot it. Your rifle leans against the wall, always loaded, always ready. Moose meat would feed you for months, but you assess your supplies and decide against it. You've got caribou meat still hanging, fish preserved enough to last. No need to kill unnecessarily. That's a city person's thinking, taking more than you need just because you can. Instead, you reach for your camera. The Super 8mm film camera is your second journal, capturing what words cannot. You've rigged a hand-cranked mechanism to wind it, eliminating the need for batteries that would die in this cold. As the moose moves along the shore, you carefully frame each shot, documenting its behavior with the eye of a naturalist. The morning stretches into afternoon. You've become acutely aware of how the light moves now, how precious each moment of daylight is. By 2 p.m, the sun is already setting, casting long blue shadows across the snow. The temperature drops further. Time for the water run. You grab your axe and buckets and head out to the lake. The surface ice must be chopped through each time, a task that leaves you sweating despite the cold, your muscles burning with the effort. The hole you cut yesterday has frozen solid, nearly 8 inches thick now. You swing the axe methodically, careful not to send the blade plunging into the water when it finally breaks through. The lake reveals itself beneath the shattered ice, impossibly clear, so pristine you can see 30 feet down to where lake trout hover like ghosts above the rocky bottom. You dip your bucket carefully, the water so cold it steams in the frigid air. The walk back to the cabin with full water buckets is treacherous. A slip could mean a soaking in sub-zero temperatures, potentially deadly when you're miles from help. You place each foot with deliberate care, testing the snow before committing your weight. Back inside, you hang a pot of water over the fire. Simple tasks take on ritual significance when they're tied to survival. The water will be used carefully, some for drinking, some for cooking, a small portion set aside for washing yourself and your single set of dishes. Nothing wasted. As darkness falls completely by mid-afternoon, you feel the familiar tightening in your chest. Not quite anxiety, but a primal response to the encroaching night. Humans aren't meant to live with 18 hours of darkness. Your body rebels against it, even as your mind has accepted it. Dinner is simple. A piece of caribou meat, so frozen it has to be sawed rather than cut. Dry berries reconstituted in water, the last biscuit from yesterday's baking. You eat mechanically, focused more on the calories than the taste. In this cold, your body burns fuel at an astonishing rate just to maintain core temperature. Evening arrives early, stretching out impossibly long ahead of you. This is when the isolation hits hardest. Back in civilization, this would be time for conversation, entertainment, connection. Here, there's just the occasional pop of the fire and the wind probing for weaknesses in your cabin walls. You've developed habits to fill these endless winter evenings. Carving, for one. Your hands stay busy shaping pieces of wood into useful items. Spoons, bowls, handles for tools. Tonight you're working on a new hinged box to hold your fishing tackle. The repetitive motion of the knife is soothing, almost meditative. I could sell these back in civilization, you mutter to yourself, examining a nearly finished spoon. Genuine Alaskan handcrafts. The thought makes you snort with laughter. The idea of rejoining that world of commerce and consumption seems increasingly foreign. Out here, things have value based on their use, not some arbitrary price tag. You've brought a few books, practical guides mostly, reference materials about edible plants, animal tracking, weather prediction, but there's also a dog-eared copy of Thoreau's Walden. You read it by firelight, finding both kinship and amusement in his experiment with self-reliance. Thoreau had it easy with his little pond and town just a mile away. This is the real thing. Genuine, uncompromising wilderness. The evening stretches on. You feed the fire regularly, knowing it can't be allowed to die during the night. At these temperatures, the cold would claim you before morning. The routine is well established now. Bank the coals, position the largest logs to burn slowly through the night. Adjust the damper to maintain airflow without wasting heat. Sleep comes in stages. You drift off, then wake to add wood to the fire. Drift off again, then wake to the sound of ice cracking on the lake. Rifle shots in the darkness, startlingly loud in the silent night. The temperature has dropped to 40 below. At this cold, strange things happen. Trees explode as their sap freezes and expands. Metal becomes brittle enough to shatter. The air itself seems to crystallize, carrying sounds with supernatural clarity. Around midnight, a new sound penetrates your half-sleep, a howl, high and lonesome, echoing across the frozen landscape. Then another joins it, and another, a wolf pack communicating in the darkness. You lie perfectly still, listening to their eerie chorus. Not close enough to worry about, but near enough to remind you of your place in this wild hierarchy. You've seen their tracks circling your cabin, investigating this strange new addition to their territory. Unlike bears, wolves rarely attack humans, but their presence commands respect. They are the true masters of this winter world, perfectly evolved for survival in conditions that push human endurance to its limits. The wolf's song continues for nearly an hour, a complex conversation of howls, yips, and barks. You listen, transfixed, until they fade into the distance, likely on the trail of caribou or moose. Sleep returns, broken and vigilant. The dreams that come are vivid with isolation. Vast, empty landscapes, searching for something unnamed, the sensation of being watched by unseen eyes. You wake often, checking the temperature, adding wood to the hungry fire. Morning comes late, almost a relief after the endless night. The routine begins again. Fire, coffee, food, chores. The day's project is finishing the cache, an elevated storage platform that will keep your food safe from marauding animals. Built on stilts 10 feet high, accessible only by a removable ladder, it's your fortress against the wilderness's attempts to claim your precious supplies. The work is brutally difficult in the cold. Metal tools stick to bare skin, tearing flesh when pulled away. Lumber, frozen solid, dull saw blades after just a few cuts. Your breath freezes in your beard, creating an ice mask that must be periodically broken away. Fingers become clumsy in mittens, but expose them for dexterity and frostbite threatens within minutes. Yet there's deep satisfaction in the progress. Each nail driven, each board secured, is a small victory against the elements. By mid-afternoon, with the sun already setting, the cache stands complete, a testament to human ingenuity against overwhelming natural forces. You stand back, admiring your work. Something moves in your peripheral vision, a flash of red against the snow. You turn slowly, careful not to make sudden movements. A fox stands watching you, its rust-coloured coat brilliant against the white landscape. It's a healthy specimen, thick winter fur fluffed against the cold, intelligent eyes assessing you with unmistakable curiosity. Neither predator nor prey to a human, it shows little fear, maintaining its position about 30 feet away. "Hey there," you say softly. The sound of your voice after days of silence startles the fox, but it doesn't run. Instead, it cocks its head, ears pivoting forward with interest. These moments, these connections with wild creatures, have become increasingly important. Without human companionship, the animals have become your society, your neighbours, your entertainment. You observe them with an intensity and patience few modern humans ever develop, learning their habits, their personalities, their complex relationships. The fox watches for several minutes, then turns and trots away, following some inscrutable vulpine agenda. You watch until it disappears into the trees, feeling oddly bereft when it's gone. December deepens, bringing the winter solstice, the darkest day of the year. You mark it with a small celebration, allowing yourself an extra ration of coffee, a special meal of lake trout baked with wild herbs collected months ago and carefully dried. These small indulgences take on outsized importance in a life stripped to essentials. At the solstice, daylight lasts barely 3 hours. The sun never truly rises, just skims the horizon, casting a perpetual twilight before sinking away. This is the turning point, though. From here, each day brings slightly more light, a promise of spring that seems impossibly distant. The cold intensifies. 50 below now, a temperature at which physical laws seem to alter. Throw a cup of boiling water into the air, and it freezes before hitting the ground, transformed into a cloud of ice crystals. Your urine freezes in an arc if you relieve yourself outside. The trees around the cabin crack and groan under the strain of internal ice, their dormant life force suspended until spring. The silence at this temperature is absolute. No birds call, no insects buzz, no leaves rustle. Even the wind seems stunned into stillness. The only sounds are those you make yourself. The crunch of snowshoes, the rasp of your breathing, the thud of an axe on wood. Your body has changed too. You're leaner now, all excess burned away by constant work and cold. Your hands are calloused, your face weathered. Muscles you never knew existed have developed to meet the daily challenges of wilderness life. But the most profound changes are internal. Your senses have sharpened to an almost primal edge. You can smell snow coming hours before it falls. You can detect the subtle change in light that means the temperature is dropping. You can distinguish between wolf, fox, and lynx tracks at a glance, reading the snow like a newspaper. Your perception of time has altered too. No longer bound by clocks or calendars, you move to the rhythm of light and dark, hunger and satisfaction, energy and fatigue. Days don't have names anymore. They're measured in tasks completed, wood chopped, water gathered, food secured. December 25th arrives. Christmas by the calendar you still maintain in your journal. The day holds no special significance out here, but you mark it anyway, a small nod to the civilization you've left behind. You allow yourself to remember past holidays, family gatherings, the comfortable predictability of social rituals. But strangely, there's no longing in these memories. They feel distant, like scenes from someone else's life. The isolation that once seemed so daunting has become comfortable, even preferred. The simplicity of this existence, challenging as it is, has a clarity that modern life lacks. That night, the aurora borealis appears, painting the sky with undulating ribbons of green and purple light. You stand outside despite the bone-crushing cold, head tilted back in wonder. The display intensifies, curtains of luminescence dancing across the stars, reflected in the frozen surface of twin lakes below. It's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen, worth every hardship, every moment of struggle, worth building a cabin by hand, worth hauling water through waist-deep snow, worth the endless darkness and numbing cold. In this moment, under the flowing light of the aurora, you understand with perfect clarity why you came here. Not to escape civilization, but to find something essential that it had buried, a connection to the natural world so deep it transcends comfort, convenience, even safety. You've been at Twin Lakes just over half a year now. The hardest months, January, February, still lie ahead. But standing under that spectral sky, you know with absolute certainty that you'll make it. And more than that you'll stay, not just for the year you initially planned, but for as long as your body allows. This is home now. This vast, unforgiving, breathtakingly beautiful wilderness, these mountains and frozen lakes, these wolves and foxes and moose, this sky filled with dancing light. This is where Richard Proenica belongs, and for the next 30 years this is where he'll remain, living a life few of us can imagine, but many secretly yearn for. Meanwhile, you're drifting deeper into your own soft blankets, warm and secure, yet perhaps feeling a small pull toward that simpler, harder, clearer life. The kind where every comfort is earned, where survival itself is an achievement, where connection to the natural world isn't an occasional hike, but a constant, inescapable reality. Sleep now. The Alaskan wilderness will be waiting for you tomorrow night with new challenges and quiet revelations. January in Alaska doesn't arrive gently. It kicks the door down and makes itself at home. The thermometer outside your cabin window reads 60 below zero this morning. Not minus 60 with wind chill or feels like minus 60. Actual literal 60 degrees below zero. At this temperature, reality itself seems altered. Mercury freezes solid, gasoline turns to jelly, the moisture in your exhaled breath crystallizes with an audible tinkling sound, like tiny wind chimes. You wake before dawn, not difficult when darkness stretches for 20 hours a day. The fire has burned dangerously low overnight, and the cabin interior has dropped to near freezing. Your fingers are stiff as you fumble with kindling, carefully nursing the remaining embers back to life. A single mistake means starting from scratch with frozen matches and numb hands. Come on, you mutter, gently blowing on the tiny flame, licking at a curl of birch bark. It catches, spreads, and you carefully add twigs, then small sticks, then finally a split log. The fire roars back to life, throwing welcome heat against your face. Your beard is frozen to the blankets during the night. You have to carefully thaw it free, losing a few hairs in the process. Glamorous wilderness living at its finest, you snort, rubbing your chin. January is survival mode. The brutal cold means every task takes 3 times longer than normal. Simple chores become monumental challenges. Chopping firewood leaves your hands aching for hours afterward, despite heavy mittens. Trips to the outhouse are Arctic expeditions, requiring full gear and careful planning. Cooking means thawing everything first over the fire. Meat, vegetables, even flour becomes rock solid in the intense cold. The isolation deepens with the winter. No planes have landed on the frozen lake in weeks. The temperature is too extreme for safe flying. Your only connection to the outside world is a small transistor radio that picks up occasional broadcasts from Anchorage when atmospheric conditions allow. One night, huddled near the fire with a cup of pine needle tea, good for vitamin C, critical for preventing scurvy, you pick up a news broadcast. The Apollo 8 mission has successfully orbited the moon. The Vietnam War continues to rage. Richard Nixon is preparing for his presidential inauguration. It all sounds like news from another planet. These events, seemingly so important in the world you left behind, feel distant and irrelevant compared to the immediate concerns of your daily existence. Gathering firewood, melting snow for water, maintaining your shelter against the relentless cold. But something shifts as January edges into February. The change is subtle at first, a barely perceptible lengthening of daylight. 10 minutes more each day, then 15, then 20. The temperature remains brutally cold, but the psychological effect of increasing light is profound. The crushing weight of darkness begins to lift. Your mood improves. You find yourself whistling as you work, something you haven't done in months. February 10th, 1969, you write in your journal. Noticed first raven call this morning. Temp still 42 degree falls, but sun-cleared mountain ridge by 9:17 a.m. Birds seemed as pleased as I am about the light. The wildlife that has been conspicuously absent during the darkest months begins to return. Ptarmigan appear like ghosts in their winter white plumage, nearly invisible against the snow until they move. You spot a wolverine one morning, trotting purposefully across the frozen lake, leaving a distinctive track that looks like a miniature bear with a longer stride. You've become a dedicated observer of these wild neighbours. Their habits, movements, and interactions fill your journal pages. This isn't just scientific curiosity or a way to pass time. Understanding the wildlife patterns is essential for survival. The animals tell you what you need to know about your environment. They're the true experts on wilderness living. By late February, you've established a routine that works with the intense cold rather than fighting against it. The key is preparation and patience. Nothing can be rushed. Every task must be planned, every tool ready, every movement efficient. Your day typically begins hours before dawn. Fire first, always fire. Then coffee, a luxury you've come to appreciate with almost religious devotion. Breakfast is usually the same. Sourdough pancakes from a starter you've kept alive through careful feeding, topped with preserved berries, or the last of your precious maple syrup. The monotony of the diet doesn't bother you anymore. Food is fuel, not entertainment. Morning chores are tackled during the precious hours of daylight, checking snares for snowshoe hares, though they've been frustratingly empty lately, hauling water from the hole you maintain in the lake ice, splitting more firewood, an endless task in this cold. You've gotten better at reading the weather, cloud patterns, wind direction, the way smoke rises from your chimney, all provide clues about coming conditions. This morning, a thin ring around the sun tells you a storm is approaching, probably within 24 hours. Better get extra wood in, you decide, reaching for your axe. The work is hard, but your body has adapted remarkably. Tasks that left you exhausted in October now feel manageable. You've developed a wiry, functional strength, not the showy muscles of a weightlifter, but the lean efficiency of someone who uses their body as a tool every day. March arrives with dramatic shifts. The temperature still plunges to 40 below at night, but daytime highs occasionally reach zero, practically tropical compared to January's depths. The increased sunlight is transformative. It pours into your cabin through the south-facing window, creating pools of warmth on the wooden floor. One morning in mid-March, you're outside filling your wood carriers when you hear it, a sound so unexpected it stops you in your tracks. Dripping, the sound of water in liquid form, something you haven't heard in months. The sun has grown strong enough to melt a tiny patch of snow on the dark roof of your cabin, creating a single persistent drip from the eave. You stand transfixed, listening to this harbinger of spring with something approaching reverence. After the frozen silence of deep winter, this simple sound represents a profound shift in your world. Would you listen to that, you say to a curious camp robber bird that has landed nearby hoping for a handout? That's the sound of winter losing its grip. The bird cocks its head, more interested in potential food than your philosophical observations. Later that week, you hear another sound that confirms the seasonal shift, the distant honking of migrating geese, still unseen but clearly headed north along ancient flyways. Their calls echo across the frozen landscape, a promise of renewal. You mark these phenological events carefully in your journal. First drip, first returning bird species, first tracks of animals emerging from winter dens. These observations form a calendar far more relevant to your life than the paper one tacked to your cabin wall. As daylight stretches to 12 hours, then 14, your energy surges. Projects abandoned during dark months are resumed. You begin carving a new set of bowls from birch burls collected last fall. You repair snowshoes damaged during winter hunts. You meticulously clean your rifle and fishing gear, preparing for the coming seasons of abundance. The increased light reveals your cabin in unflattering detail. Soot has accumulated on the walls near the fireplace. Dust and food scraps have collected in corners. Your bedding, unwashed for months, has developed a distinctive wilderness funk. Spring cleaning time, you announce to the empty cabin. The task is more challenging than it would be in civilization. Without running water, every drop for washing must be hauled from the lake and heated on the fire. Soap is a precious commodity, used sparingly and stretched with lye made from wood ash, but the effort is worth it. The clean cabin lifts your spirits further, a physical representation of the seasonal renewal happening outside. April brings dramatic change to Twin Lakes. The ice that has encased the landscape for 6 months begins to show signs of weakness. Pressure cracks appear, creating jagged lines across the lake surface. The edges near the shore develop a dark, sodden appearance as water seeps up through thinning ice. The snow undergoes a metamorphosis, transitioning from light powder to heavy, wet crystals that reflect the strengthening sun with blinding intensity. You fashion snow goggles from a piece of wood with narrow slits cut into it, a primitive but effective solution to prevent snow blindness. Wildlife activity explodes as if a switch has been flipped. Suddenly, the forest and lake shores are busy with creatures emerging from winter torpor or returning from southern migrations. You spot fresh bear tracks one morning, a grizzly awakened from hibernation, hungry and potentially dangerous. Better keep the rifle closer, you remind yourself, noticing the tracks lead uncomfortably near your cabin. The bears pose the greatest physical threat in your environment, but they're not the most persistent annoyance. That honor goes to the mosquitoes that emerge as the first patches of ground become exposed. These aren't the mild insects of more temperate regions. Alaskan mosquitoes are legendary for their size, numbers, and ferocity. Damn things could drain a moose if they coordinated their attack, you mutter, swatting futilely at the whining cloud that surrounds your head whenever you step outside. You develop strategies, smearing exposed skin with mud, wearing head nets, burning particular woods that create mosquito-repelling smoke. But mostly you endure. The insects are simply part of the bargain you've made with this wilderness. Their presence, maddening as it is, signals the return of life to a landscape emerging from winter's grip. The ice breakup on Twin Lakes is not a gentle event. After weeks of weakening, it happens with startling suddenness. You're inside your cabin one afternoon in late April when you hear it, a sound like distant artillery fire followed by an extended groaning that seems to come from the earth itself. you rush outside to witness one of nature's most dramatic spectacles. The lake ice is fracturing along its entire length, massive sheets buckling and heaving against each other with a force that's both terrifying and awe-inspiring. The sound is deafening, cracking, popping, thunderous crashes as ice that's nearly 3 feet thick breaks apart after months of solid confinement. Holy hell, you breathe, watching as a pressure ridge erupts near the center of the lake, sending ice chunks bigger than your cabin shooting upward before they crash back down. The process continues for hours. By evening, what was a solid white expanse in the morning has become a jumble of floating ice islands separated by channels of dark, frigid water, and by the following day, large sections of open water dominate the lake, though significant ice flows still drift with the wind. The transformation of your environment continues at an accelerating pace. Snow retreats up the mountainsides as if being chased by the rising sun. The exposed ground exhales a rich, earthy scent that fills your nostrils after months of the odorless frozen world. Plants that have lain dormant beneath the snow suddenly race toward the sun, first with tiny, tentative shoots, then with an explosion of green that seems to happen overnight. May 3rd, 1969, your journal entry begins. Lake ice mostly gone now, except North Shore. First trout jumped near creek mouth this morning. Counted 17 species of birds today, including a pair of loons back on their usual territory. Spring arrived all at once. The seasonal change demands adaptation. Your heavy winter gear is packed away, replaced by lighter clothing suitable for the rapidly warming days. Snowshoes are hung up, hiking boots come out. The diet that sustained you through winter, heavy on meat and preserved foods, gradually shifts to include fresh greens as edible plants emerge. You're particularly excited about fishing prospects. During winter, catching lake trout required drilling holes through thick ice, a labor-intensive process for minimal returns. Now, with open water, you can use your small handmade boat to access prime fishing spots. The first outing is almost embarrassingly successful. Within an hour, you've landed 4 fat lake trout, each weighing several pounds. Fresh fish is a welcome change from the monotony of winter fare, the flesh firm and flavorful when cooked over an open fire with a few wild herbs. This, you say to yourself as you savor the simple meal, is living pretty high. Spring brings its own challenges. The ground turns to mud, making every trip outside a sloppy ordeal. Streams swollen with snowmelt become raging torrents, altering your usual travel routes. The previously benign landscape suddenly contains new hazards. Unstable snow bridges, waterlogged ground that can swallow a boot, slopes made treacherous by thawing soil. But after winter's brutal constraints, these challenges feel almost welcome. They're the price of renewed freedom, the ability to move across the landscape without battling killing cold and perpetual darkness. As May progresses, you begin to prepare your small garden plot. During your first summer at Twin Lakes, you learned which vegetables could survive in this harsh climate with its abbreviated growing season. Potatoes do reasonably well. So do certain hardy greens, radishes, and turnips. You carefully work the soil, incorporating precious compost saved from kitchen scraps, creating raised beds that will warm more quickly in the spring sun. This task is deeply satisfying in a way that's difficult to articulate. There's something profound about placing seeds in soil, about participating in this most fundamental act of creating food after months of taking from the landscape, hunting, fishing, gathering what others have grown. It feels balanced to give something back, to tend rather than simply extract. The garden represents something else too. Commitment. Annual plants need a full season of care. By planting, you're declaring your intention to remain, to see another full cycle of seasons in this place that has shifted from a temporary experiment to something that feels increasingly like home. I think I've found where I belong, you write in your journal that night. This life isn't easy, but it's real in a way I've never experienced before. Every comfort is earned, every challenge is genuine, nothing is artificial or pointless. I can't imagine going back to the noise and distraction of civilization. As spring fully establishes itself, you begin more extensive explorations of the surrounding wilderness. During winter, travel was limited by cold, snow depth, and the constant need to maintain your cabin's warmth. Now, with 18 hours of daylight and temperatures regularly reaching the 50s, you can venture farther. One morning in late May, you pack a simple kit: jerky, hardtack, a small pot for tea, your rifle, and a light blanket, and set out to climb one of the peaks that has loomed over your cabin all winter. The hike is challenging. Without trails, you must pick your own route through dense underbrush, across streams still fierce with snowmelt, up slopes that occasionally require using your hands as well as feet. But the reward is worth every moment of effort. From the summit, you can see for 100 miles in every direction. Twin Lakes spreads below you like a map, your tiny cabin barely visible on its shore. Mountains march to every horizon, many still capped with snow despite the warming days. The vastness is humbling, a reminder of your own insignificance in this immense landscape. Yet there's also a sense of accomplishment, of having earned this perspective through your own efforts. No helicopter brought you here, no guided tour led the way. This view belongs to you because you climbed every vertical foot through your own determination. You sit for hours on the summit, watching clouds cast moving shadows across the valleys below, identifying landmarks, tracing the routes of streams and game trails. This isn't idle sightseeing. You're building a mental map of your territory, knowledge that might prove critical for hunting or in an emergency. When you finally descend as evening approaches, though evening is a relative term when the sun barely sets, you feel different. The mountain has changed you subtly but permanently. You've expanded your understanding of this place you've chosen to call home. You've seen it from above, comprehended its scale and interconnections in a way impossible from ground level. Back at the cabin, you record the experience in your journal, sketching a rough map of what you observed. The entry concludes, "Feel like I truly began to know this country today. Not just live in it, but understand it. This is just the beginning." As May transitions to June, the landscape reaches full, vibrant life. The brief Arctic summer is an explosion of activity, as if the entire ecosystem is racing to complete its essential cycles during the precious weeks of warmth and light. Birds nest frantically, raising young in record time. Plants grow with visible speed, some adding inches in a single day. Berries form and ripen rapidly. Animals that hibernated or migrated emerge in peak condition, taking advantage of the sudden abundance to rebuild bodies depleted by winter's hardships. You move with the rhythm of this accelerated season. Days grow longer until the sun barely sets, just dipping below the horizon for a few hours of twilight before rising again. You find yourself working outside until midnight sometimes, the extended daylight disrupting normal sleep patterns but providing welcome opportunity to accomplish projects postponed during winter's darkness. "Who needs to sleep when there's so much living to do?" you say to a fox that watches curiously as you repair your boat near the lakeshore at 11 p.m. The fox, like most of the wildlife, has grown accustomed to your presence over the months. While not tame, many animals show less fear than they would toward most humans. They've learned you're not a typical threat. You hunt only what you need, move with respect through their territory, and have become, in some sense, just another creature adapting to this demanding environment. As the first anniversary of your arrival at Twin Lakes approaches, you take stock of the experiment. 1 year in the wilderness, alone with your thoughts and the rhythms of the natural world. 1 year of relying entirely on your own skills, judgment, and labor for survival. The man who stepped off the float plane 12 months ago is gone, transformed by the crucible of isolation and challenge. In his place stands someone leaner, quieter, more patient, more attuned to subtleties of weather and wildlife. Someone who measures success not in dollars or possessions, but in simple, tangible achievements. A well-built shelter, a successful hunt, enough firewood split before the snow flies. May 21st, 1969. 1 year at Twin Lakes today. Your journal entry begins. Hardly seems possible, so much time has passed, yet I feel like I've always been here. The question now is not whether I can survive a year in the wilderness. That's been answered. The question is whether I want to leave. And I don't. Not yet. Maybe not for a very long time. Your original plan was to stay just 1 year, to prove it could be done, to experience the complete cycle of seasons, then return to civilization with stories and experiences few modern humans could claim. But as the anniversary arrives, the thought of leaving feels wrong, premature. There are still mountains to climb, skills to master, seasons to witness with your hard-won wilderness eyes. And so, Richard Proeneke makes the decision that will define the rest of his life. He will stay at Twin Lakes, not for another month or season, but for decades to come. The experiment in wilderness living has become something else entirely, a life chosen deliberately with full awareness of both its hardships and its profound rewards. Meanwhile, you're drifting deeper into sleep, your own bed a cocoon of modern comfort as you vicariously experience this simpler, harder, clearer existence. The challenges Proeneke embraced daily make our own problems seem smaller, our conveniences more remarkable, our disconnection from natural rhythms more apparent. Sleep now. Tomorrow night, we'll continue our journey through the remarkable life of a man who chose to step away from modern comforts to find something essential that most of us have forgotten. Summer at Twin Lakes isn't really a season. It's more like a brief, brilliant pause between stretches of cold. You wake with the sun streaming through your cabin window at 4:30 a.m., though wake isn't quite right since you never fully slept. The constant daylight of an Alaskan summer plays tricks with your brain. The sun barely sets now, just dips below the horizon for a few hours of extended twilight before rising again. Your body, still wired to respond to light cues, doesn't know when to shut down. Time for coffee, you mutter, your voice rough from disuse. Days can pass without you speaking aloud. The silence doesn't bother you anymore. In fact, you've grown to prefer it to the constant noise of civilization, the mechanical drone, the empty chatter, the persistent demand for attention. The cabin is warm already, no fire needed. Outside, the temperature reads 62 degrees, practically tropical after the brutal winter. You step outside in just pants and a flannel shirt, a luxury unimaginable a few months ago when exposed skin would freeze in minutes. The mosquitoes find you immediately. Their high-pitched whine forms a cloud around your head as you walk toward the lake, swatting futilely. Price of paradise, you sigh, pulling a head net from your pocket and slipping it on. The lake stretches before you, a perfect mirror in the early morning stillness. Twin Lakes earned its name honestly. Two pristine bodies of water connected by a short channel, surrounded by mountains that seem to rise directly from the shoreline. The water is so clear you can see 30 feet down, watch trout swimming lazily above rocky shelves. Your small boat waits on the shore, carefully maintained and essential for summer travel. Walking takes too long, burns too much energy. The boat extends your range, lets you access fishing spots and far shores with relative ease. But first, breakfast. You've developed a routine. Sourdough hotcakes with crowberries you gathered and preserved last fall. The sourdough starter lives in a small crock near the stove, fed regularly with flour to keep the culture alive. It's been going for over a year now, developed from scratch when you first arrived. The sour tang it adds to the hotcakes has become the taste of home. After breakfast, you check your calendar, a self-made system of marks on paper to track the passing days. Easy to lose track when every day follows similar patterns dictated by necessity rather than appointments. Today marks mid-June, prime time for collecting fresh greens. Foraging day, you decide, grabbing a canvas bag and your small field guide to edible plants. This is the reality of wilderness living that romantic notions often miss. It's not all hunting big game and dramatic survival. Much of it is this, the quiet, persistent work of gathering food when it's available. Berries, roots, shoots, leaves. These plants provide essential nutrients your meat-heavy diet would otherwise lack. You've learned which plants are worth the effort. Fireweed shoots taste similar to asparagus when harvested young. Wild rhubarb makes a tart addition to meals. Fiddlehead ferns, curled tight like the scroll of a violin, offer a nutty flavor when briefly cooked. The morning passes in careful gathering. You work methodically, taking some plants but leaving plenty to reproduce. This isn't just conservation ethics, it's self-interest. You need these plants to return next year and the year after. Sustainability isn't an abstract concept when your day depends on it. By noon, your bag is full of greens and your hands stained with plant juices. The sun beats down with surprising intensity. Another misconception about Alaska, that it's always cold. Summer days can reach the 80s, and with no shade except the forest, working in direct sunlight becomes draining quickly. You return to the cabin, hang the greens in small bunches to dry, and prepare for the afternoon's task, fishing. The boat slides smoothly into the water, barely disturbing the surface. You've become adept at moving quietly in this environment, minimizing your impact not just from respect, but because it improves your chances of success. Wildlife doesn't approach noisy humans. Rowing with practiced strokes, you head toward the channel connecting the Twin Lakes. Experience has taught you this is where the largest grayling and lake trout congregate, drawn by the current that carries food and oxygen. The fishing rod is your own creation, fashioned from a supple spruce sapling fishing line ordered through Babe Allsworth on his infrequent supply flights, and hooks you've carefully maintained and sharpened. The reel is store-bought, one luxury you allowed yourself. Your first cast lands perfectly at the edge of the current. The lure, a simple spoon beaten from a tin can, flashes convincingly as you retrieve it slowly across the channel. The strike comes so fast it startles you. The rod bends dramatically, the line cutting through water as something substantial takes the lure and runs with it. "Whoa there," you mutter, adjusting your grip, playing the fish with the patience of someone who knows rushing leads to broken lines and lost meals. After a 5-minute battle, you net a grayling so large it barely fits the landing net. Its dorsal fin, the sail-like feature that makes these fish so distinctive, rises high, shimmering with iridescent purple and blue that no painting could capture accurately. "Aren't you a beauty?" you tell the fish as you quickly dispatch it with a sharp knock to the head. No point in letting it suffer, and fresher meat tastes better. By late afternoon, you've caught 4 large fish, more than enough for several meals. Nothing will be wasted. What you don't eat fresh will be smoked or dried for future use. The smoking process is another skill you've refined through trial and error. The small smokehouse you built last summer stands near the cabin, a simple structure of logs with racks inside where fish fillets hang over a carefully tended fire of green alderwood. The smoke preserves the meat while adding flavour, and properly done, the fish will keep for months. As you clean the day's catch by the lake shore, a movement catches your eye. Across the water, a cow moose and her calf have emerged from the forest to drink. They move with surprising grace for such gangly creatures, the mother constantly alert for predators while the calf stays close to her side. You freeze, not wanting to startle them. This is one of the gifts of wilderness living, these unplanned encounters, these glimpses into lives unaltered by human presence. You watch until they retreat back into the trees, the entire interaction completely natural. No fences, no viewing platforms, no interpretive signs, just you and wild animals sharing space as humans and wildlife did for millennia before modern separation. The evening stretches out endlessly before you, the sun still high in the sky at 8 p.m. This is when you turn to projects that require good light and concentration. Tonight, it's journal writing, not just recording the day's activities, but detailed observations of wildlife behavior, plant growth patterns, weather conditions. These notes, meticulously maintained day after day, will eventually comprise one of the most complete records of wilderness life ever created by a single observer. You've also begun experimenting with a movie camera, setting it up on a tripod to document your activities. The mechanics fascinate you. You've always been good with your hands, understanding how things work, making them better. The camera is wind-up, requiring no electricity, perfect for your off-grid existence. July 17th, 1969, you write in your journal. Fireweed in full bloom along lakeshore. First blueberries ripening on south slopes. Graylings striking aggressively at the channel. Counted 14 species of birds today, including a merlin hunting near the creek mouth. As you write, a small red fox appears near your cabin. It's the same one you've seen periodically since spring, identifiable by a distinctive white-tipped tail. Not quite tame, but certainly habituated to your presence. It watches with intelligent eyes as you move around outside. Evening red, you say casually, having named the fox for lack of more creative options. Catch any mice today? The fox tilts its head as if considering your question, then trots off purposefully into the underbrush. These one-sided conversations with wildlife have become normal, not because you're going crazy with isolation, though some might think so, but because it acknowledges the relationship you've developed with the creatures who share this space. They're not pets, but they're not strangers either. You've become part of the landscape in a way few modern humans ever experience. The midnight sun finally begins to dip toward the horizon, casting long golden light across the lake. This magic hour stretches for several actual hours at this latitude, the world transformed into warm hues that make even familiar views seem new and extraordinary. You sit on a log outside your cabin, sipping tea made from Labrador leaves gathered earlier, watching the light change. This simple activity, just sitting, observing, being fully present, has become one of your greatest pleasures. No distractions, no obligations, just sensory immersion in the world around you. A loon calls from the lake, its eerie wail echoing off the mountains. Another answers from farther away. Their conversation continues as darkness finally begins to gather, close to midnight now. Sleep comes in fits and starts during these bright nights. You've fashioned makeshift blinds for the cabin windows, but light still leaks around the edges. Your body has adjusted somewhat, but humans aren't meant to live with 20 hours of daylight. You find yourself working later, rising earlier, catching naps when fatigue overtakes you rather than following a normal sleep schedule. The summer solstice, June 21st, marks the turning point. After that, each day brings slightly less light, an almost imperceptible shift at first, but accelerating as August approaches. The land seems to sense this change before humans can detect it, a subtle urgency entering animal behavior as they prepare for the coming cold. You wake one morning in late July to changed light, not dimmer but different somehow. Stepping outside, you see why. Smoke has rolled in overnight, turning the sun into a red orb and casting a sepia tone over the landscape. Forest fires, likely started by lightning strikes miles away, have created this apocalyptic atmosphere. For 3 days the smoke persists, burning your eyes, making strenuous work difficult. You stay close to the cabin, using the time to repair equipment and organize supplies. The eerie light creates a sense of suspension, as if the normal flow of time has been temporarily halted. When the wind finally shifts and clear air returns, you feel like you've emerged from a strange dream. The familiar mountains and lake have an enhanced vividness after the smoky haze, colors more intense, edges sharper. August brings subtle but accelerating change. Nights grow noticeably darker. The first yellow appears in birch leaves. Berries reach peak ripeness, then begin to fade. Mushrooms push up through forest duff after rainfall, some edible, some deadly poisonous, requiring careful identification. This is perhaps the most important month for winter preparation. Everything now is focused on the coming cold, on storing enough food to survive when the land goes dormant. You spend full days picking blueberries, cranberries, and crowberries, your fingers stained purple with juice. These fruits, spread on cloth to dry in the sun or preserved with precious sugar, will provide essential vitamins during the months when fresh plants are unavailable. The garden you planted in spring has produced a modest harvest. Potatoes mostly, some carrots and turnips, hardy vegetables that can survive the short growing season. You dig them carefully, storing the best specimens in a root cellar dug beneath the cabin where they'll remain cool but won't freeze. Meat is the most critical resource. You take a caribou with a clean rifle shot, not a trophy hunt, but a matter of survival. For 3 days afterward, you work continuously to process the animal. Nothing is wasted. Meat is cut into strips for drying or smoking. Fat is rendered for cooking and waterproofing. Bones are saved for tools and broth. The hide is carefully scraped and stretched for tanning. This activity, the killing and processing of an animal for food, connects you to human history in a visceral way. For most of our existence as a species, this was how we survived. The modern disconnection from food sources, the cellophane-wrapped anonymity of supermarket meat, seems increasingly strange from your perspective. The caribou will provide hundreds of meals over the coming months. You feel both gratitude for the sustenance and responsibility to use it well, to honor the life taken by ensuring nothing is wasted. As August wanes, the first frost arrives earlier than in more temperate regions. One morning, you wake to white-coated grass and crystallized dew on spider webs. It melts by mid-morning, but serves as a reminder. Winter is coming, and it gives no quarter to the unprepared. You've developed a mental checklist of winter preparations refined by hard experience. Firewood, at least 6 cords split and stacked, more if possible. Food, dried, smoked, preserved, enough for 5 months minimum. Equipment, everything repaired. Spares created for essential items. Cabin, chinking, checked between logs. Roof inspected, chimney cleaned. The work is constant but purposeful. Each completed task is a direct investment in your survival, a problem solved before it becomes critical. There's satisfaction in this concrete relationship between effort and outcome, so different from the abstract rewards of modern employment. One evening in late August, you hear the distant drone of an airplane engine. Babe's monthly supply run, bringing mail, basic staples, ammunition, and any special requests you've made by radio. The small float plane circles once, then lands smoothly on the lake surface, taxiing toward shore with practiced precision. You're surprised to realize how much you look forward to these brief contacts with another human, despite your comfort with solitude. Babe steps from the plane, a weather-beaten man in his 60s who seems part of the wilderness himself. He's been flying the Alaskan bush for decades, knows the territory as well as anyone alive. "Looking more like a mountain man every time I see you," he says by way of greeting, his voice startlingly loud after weeks of hearing only your own. "Feeling like one too," you reply with a laugh, helping to unload supplies from the plane's small cargo compartment. The visit lasts barely an hour, enough time to exchange news, share coffee, and load a few items you're sending out. A box of carved wooden items you've created during long winter evenings to be sold in Anchorage, letters to family and friends, film reels to be developed. "Need anything special next trip?" Babe asks as he prepares to depart. You consider mentally reviewing your supplies. More coffee if you can get it, and any news magazines. Gets a bit isolated here. He nods, understanding the balance you're trying to maintain. Self-sufficiency tempered with minimal connection to the outside world. Not a hermit rejecting humanity, but someone choosing a different relationship with civilization. As the plane lifts off, engine sound fading into distance, the silence returns like a physical presence. You stand on the shore watching until the aircraft disappears behind mountains, then turn back to your tasks with renewed focus. The first snow arrives in mid-September, earlier than in more temperate regions, just a dusting that melts by afternoon, but another sign of the seasonal wheel turning. Each day now brings visible change. More leaves yellowed and fallen, more birds departed southward, more urgency in wildlife behavior as they prepare for the coming challenge. You've begun to think like the animals, your own behavior increasingly aligned with natural rhythms rather than arbitrary human schedules. Rest when tired, eat when hungry, work according to weather and light. This biological synchronization feels deeply right, as if you're returning to a mode of existence your body recognizes from ancestral memory. The fall colours peak in a brief spectacular display. Entire hillsides blaze with yellows, oranges and reds against the dark green of spruce. You take time to appreciate this ephemeral beauty, sitting for hours on a ridge simply watching the light change across the painted landscape. This is the gift of your chosen lifestyle, the freedom to stop, to observe, to fully inhabit moments that most people would experience only fleetingly, if at all. No schedule pulls you away, no obligation dilutes your attention. You can give yourself completely to the experience of being alive in this remarkable place. By late September, the land is preparing for dormancy. Leaves carpet the ground, the last berries hang withered on branches. Migrating birds have mostly departed, leaving behind year-round residents, ravens, grey jays, chickadees that have evolved strategies for surviving the harsh conditions ahead. You too are ready. The woodshed is filled beyond capacity, split logs stacked neatly by size. The cache, that elevated storage platform you built to protect food from animals, is laden with carefully preserved provisions. The cabin has been thoroughly cleaned, maintained, prepared for the months when you'll be confined within its walls. As the equinox passes and darkness begins to dominate daylight, you feel a surprising emotion, anticipation, not dread of the coming winter, but readiness for its challenge, confidence in your preparation, even excitement for the different rhythm it brings. September 28th, 1969, you write in your journal. First substantial snow today, about 3 inches, likely to stay now. Lake beginning to freeze around edges. All preparations complete. Winter can come when it will. I'm ready. This readiness, this adaptation to seasonal extremes is perhaps the most profound change from the man who arrived at Twin Lakes nearly a year and a half ago. You've developed not just physical stamina and practical skills, but a different relationship with time, with comfort, with necessity. Modern life insulates us from natural cycles, creates an illusion of control and consistency. Here, you've surrendered that illusion, accepted the reality of forces larger than human preference, and in that surrender, paradoxically, found a deeper form of security, the confidence that comes from directly facing challenges rather than avoiding them. As darkness falls early now, around 7 p.m, you sit by the fire reading a dog-eared copy of Thoreau's Walden, one of the few books you brought. His experiment in simplified living seems almost quaint compared to your complete immersion in wilderness self-reliance. Yet his core insights resonate. The value of deliberate living, of distinguishing between true needs and artificial wants, of finding wealth in experience rather than possessions. You've gone beyond reading about such philosophy. You're living it, testing its validity not as intellectual exercise, but as practical reality. The results so far suggest Thoreau was onto something fundamental about human fulfillment. Outside, the first aurora of the season flickers across the northern sky, green and purple ribbons dancing above the mountains. You step out to watch despite the biting cold, pulled by the beauty of this natural phenomenon that no photograph truly captures. The stars are returning too, absent during summer's perpetual light, but now emerging in the lengthening nights. Without light pollution, they appear in overwhelming numbers, the Milky Way a brilliant smear across the black dome overhead. Standing under this cosmic display, your breath forming clouds in the frigid air, you feel simultaneously tiny and connected, a paradox of wilderness living. Your individual existence is minuscule against the scale of mountains and sky, yet you're intimately linked to everything around you through the direct relationship of survival. This is what Richard Proeneke found in his wilderness experiment, not an escape from life's challenges, but a more authentic way of meeting them, not isolation from reality, but immersion in its most fundamental aspects. As you drift deeper into sleep, perhaps you're feeling the pull of this simpler existence, the clarity it offers, the purpose, the direct connection between effort and outcome. Not romanticizing the hardship, but recognizing that something essential might be missing in our comfortable modern lives. The mountains and lakes of that Alaskan wilderness still exist, largely unchanged. Proenike's cabin still stands as testament to his remarkable experiment in self-reliance, and the questions his life raises remain relevant about what we really need, about what constitutes a life well lived, about our place in the natural world we've worked so hard to insulate ourselves from. Sleep now. The next chapter of this wilderness journey awaits tomorrow night. The 1970s rolled in without fanfare at Twin Lakes. No champagne, no countdown, no silly hats. Just you, alone in your cabin, making a simple note in your journal. January 1st, 1970. 40 below. Clear skies. Fresh Wolverine tracks by the creek. Time hits different when you're disconnected from the human calendar. The years that most people mark with birthdays and holidays blend together in the wilderness, replaced by a more ancient rhythm. The slow dance of seasons, the predictable yet always surprising cycle of life and death, growth and dormancy. You've been at Twin Lakes for almost 2 years now. What started as a 1-year experiment has quietly shifted into something more permanent. The thought of returning to civilization feels increasingly foreign, like contemplating a move to another planet. This place, this demanding, beautiful, unforgiving place, has become home in the deepest sense of the word. Morning arrives with pink light filtering through frost-covered windows. The thermometer reads 38 below zero, but the cabin is warm, the fire having burned steadily through the night. You've perfected the art of banking coals, arranging logs in a way that ensures slow, consistent heat without constant tending. Your morning routine has become almost ceremonial in its precision. Stoke the fire, melt snow for water, prepare a simple breakfast of sourdough, hot cakes and tea. These actions, repeated thousands of times now, carry the comfort of ritual. There's security in knowing exactly what needs to be done, in mastering the fundamental tasks of survival. After breakfast, you bundle up for the day's main project, checking the wildlife camera setup you've created. Your documentation of Twin Lakes life has evolved beyond simple journal entries. Now you position your movie camera near game trails or feeding areas, capturing animal behavior without human presence. The cold hits like a physical force when you step outside, instantly freezing the moisture in your nostrils. Even through layers of wool and down, the chill finds ways to reach your skin. You've learned not to fight it, but to work with it. Move steadily without sweating. Keep extremities covered. Understand the warning signs of frostbite. Snowshoes strapped on, you make your way through powder so dry it squeaks with each step. The landscape appears lifeless at first glance, locked in winter's grip, but your trained eye catches signs of activity everywhere. Tiny tracks of voles tunneling just beneath the snow surface, the brush of ptarmigan wings where they landed to feed on willow buds, the distinctive lope of a lynx printed clearly along the lakeshore. You've become a reader of these signs, a translator of the subtle language written in tracks and marks across the snow. What once looked like random patterns now tells stories: predator and prey, hunger and satiation, courtship and territorial disputes. The camera is where you left it 3 days ago, secured to a tree overlooking a small clearing where wolves have been passing regularly. You check the mechanism, still working despite the cold, and rewind the film. With luck, you've captured something of their behavior, adding to your growing archive of wilderness documentation. As you work, a flash of movement catches your eye. About 50 yards away, a red fox pauses, watching you with unmistakable curiosity. It's the same individual you've seen throughout the year, recognizable by a distinctive black-tipped ear. "Morning, Red," you say conversationally. "Hunting going okay?" The fox tilts its head as if considering your question, then deliberately sits down on the snow, still watching. This isn't normal wild animal behavior, but it's not quite domestication either. It's something in between, a wild creature that has assessed you and determined you're not a threat. Not competition, perhaps even occasionally beneficial when you leave scraps out. You've developed similar relationships with several of the resident animals. The family of grey jays that nests near your cabin will take food directly from your outstretched hand. A pine marten regularly inspects your woodpile for mice. Even the wolverine, usually the most elusive and aggressive of wilderness creatures, occasionally passes through your clearing in full daylight, maintaining a respectful distance but showing none of its typical wariness. These aren't pets. You're careful not to create dependency or fundamentally alter their wild behavior, but you've become part of the ecosystem in a way few humans ever experience. Not an outside observer, but a participant, another species adapting to the demands of this environment. The fox eventually trots off on some vulpine errand, and you finish your work with the camera. On the return trip, you detour to check an area where you've observed wolves feeding recently. The remains of a caribou tell the story. Tracks show where the pack brought down the animal, how they fed, which other creatures have since scavenged the leftover carcass. You don't see the kill as waste or tragedy. This is simply the way of things, the necessary transfer of energy from one life form to another. The caribou fed the wolves, who will eventually feed the soil, which will nourish plants, which will feed new caribou. The cycle continues, with or without human presence or approval. This perspective, seeing death as part of life rather than its opposite, is another profound shift from your previous existence. Modern society works desperately to separate itself from natural processes, to sanitize death, to pretend we're somehow exempt from biological reality. Here, that pretense is impossible to maintain. Back at the cabin by midday, you spend the afternoon working on carvings, small animal figures shaped from wood created during the long winter hours when outdoor activities are limited by darkness and cold. Your hands, once better suited to wrenches and engine parts, have become increasingly skilled with carving tools, bringing the forms of the animals you observe daily into three-dimensional life. As February progresses, you notice subtle changes in light and animal behavior that signal the approach of spring, still months away, but already influencing the natural world. The sun returns a little earlier each morning, sets a little later each evening. Ravens begin courtship displays, tumbling through the air in acrobatic performances. Moose, their bodies gaunt from winter's privation, start seeking willows where the first nutritious buds will soon appear. You track these changes in your journal, creating a detailed phenological record, the timing of natural events from year to year. This isn't just scientific curiosity, it's practical knowledge that shapes your own activities. When the ptarmigan begin to lose their winter white, you know it's time to prepare fishing gear. When certain plants emerge, specific nutrients become available again in your diet. The first major thaw comes in early April, a dramatic event after months of deep freeze. The sound of dripping water, absent since October, suddenly fills the air as snow begins melting from the cabin roof. The world transforms from silent white to a symphony of trickling, dripping, and occasional crashing as snow falls in heavy clumps from tree branches. With the thaw comes your busiest season. Winter allowed reflection and indoor projects, but spring demands immediate action on multiple fronts. Seeds must be planted in the small garden you've established. Fishing spots must be scouted as ice recedes from the lake edges. Tools need maintenance after winter storage. The cabin requires inspection for any damage from snow load or freezing. You work from first light until dusk, your body remembering the rhythms of physical labor after winter's relative confinement. Muscles protest, then adapt, growing stronger as the days lengthen. Your skin darkens with exposure to the strengthening sun, hands once again becoming calloused and weathered. By May, the transformation is complete. Snow remains only in shadowed pockets and high elevations. The lakes have shed their ice armor, returning to liquid blue. Plants explode from the newly exposed ground, racing to complete their life cycles during the brief growing season. Birds arrive daily from southern migrations, filling the air with calls as they establish territories and begin nesting. This year, you decide to expand your explorations, venturing farther from the cabin than before. The small boat you built, lightweight but sturdy, perfect for these protected waters, allows you to reach distant shores that would take days to access by land. On one such expedition in June, you discover a hidden valley about 5 miles from your cabin, accessible through a small stream feeding into the upper lake. Pushing through dense alders, you emerge into a meadow so vibrant with wildflowers it momentarily stops your breath. Lupine, wild iris, columbine, and dozens of species you can't name carpet the ground in a riot of color. But it's not just the flowers that make this place special. As you stand silently at the meadow edge, you realize you've stumbled upon something rare, a wildlife gathering place undisturbed by human presence. In the hour you watch, you observe 2 black bears feeding on roots and plants. A cow moose with twin calves grazing cautiously at the far end, and a wolf passing through, acknowledging the bears with cautious respect before disappearing into the trees. You make no permanent mark on this place, take nothing but mental images and a few photographs. Some spots deserve to remain untouched, even by the light human footprint you strive to maintain. In your journal that night, you record the location but make a note. Valley of Flowers, observe only, special place. As summer reaches its peak in July, Twin Lakes transforms into a landscape of almost unbelievable abundance. The water teems with fish, lake trout, grayling, northern pike, so plentiful that catching dinner requires minimal effort. Berries ripen across the hillsides. First strawberries, and blueberries, and cranberries and crowberries that will persist into fall. Game animals grow fat on the seasonal plenty, their winter gauntness replaced by healthy bulk. You've learned to flow with this abundance, to harvest what you need for current use and future storage without depleting any single resource. When blueberries peak, you gather gallons, drying most for winter use. When a caribou herd passes near the cabin, you take a single animal, processing every part from meat to sinew to hide. When salmon run up the streams connecting the lakes, you catch enough to smoke and preserve, leaving plenty to spawn and maintain the population. This balance, taking what you need while ensuring future supply, isn't just practical ecology, it's become a personal ethic. You've seen the alternative during your years in Alaska: sport hunters who kill for trophies rather than food, fishermen who take far more than they can use. Development that permanently alters habitats for temporary human convenience. Your own impact, while not zero, remains minimal and thoughtful. The cabin sits lightly on the land, built from local materials that will eventually return to the soil. Your waste is composted or buried. Your presence causes no more disruption than that of any other single animal species inhabiting this ecosystem. August brings the first hints of autumn, subtle signs recognizable only to someone attuned to the landscape's minute changes. Fireweed, which bloomed brilliantly in July, now releases its cottony seeds to drift on the breeze. The endless summer light begins to soften, shadows lengthening noticeably by evening. Bird flocks gather, preparing for southern migrations. You've been at Twin Lakes for over 2 years now, and the question that once seemed so pressing, how long will you stay, has ceased to matter. There is no end point in mind, no exit strategy. This isn't an extended camping trip or a sabbatical from real life. This has become your life, more authentic and meaningful than the existence you left behind. The occasional supply flights from Babe Allsworth provide your only regular human contact, and even these have become less frequent as your self-sufficiency increases. You've requested fewer store-bought items, learned to create more of what you need from available materials. The modern world's grip on your daily life has loosened to the point where weeks can pass without you giving it a single thought. Yet you're not a hermit rejecting humanity. You maintain correspondence with family and friends through letters carried out on Babe's plane. You stay informed about major world events through occasional newspapers and magazines. You've even begun sharing your experiences through the film footage you carefully shoot and send to be developed. This balance, living apart from civilization while still selectively engaging with it, defines your unique approach to wilderness living, not a complete rejection of society, but a deliberate choice about which aspects of it serve a life well lived. The fall colours peak in mid-September, the landscape transformed into a canvas of red, orange and gold against the dark green of spruce and the already snow-dusted mountain peaks. You spend entire days simply wandering, absorbing the ephemeral beauty before winter reclaims the land. During one such walk, you encounter a large grizzly bear feeding on blueberries about 100 yards away. The massive animal is focused intently on gorging before hibernation, scooping berries into its mouth with remarkable dexterity for such powerful paws. You freeze, assess the situation with the calm alertness that wilderness living has instilled. The bear is upwind, hasn't detected your presence. You could retreat without it ever knowing you were there, but instead you carefully find a comfortable spot, sitting quietly to observe from a respectful distance. For nearly 2 hours you watch the bear's methodical feeding, its occasional pauses to sniff the air or scan for competitors. There's nothing cute or cuddly about this creature. It's a supremely evolved predator capable of killing you with minimal effort. Yet there's no fear in your observation, just profound appreciation for its perfect adaptation to this environment, its single-minded focus on survival. Eventually, the bear ambles away, still unaware of its human observer. The encounter leaves you thoughtful, contemplative about your place in this natural hierarchy. Despite all your adaptations and learned skills, you remain in many ways a visitor here, tolerated rather than truly belonging in the primal sense that the bear does. This humility, recognizing your limitations while still asserting your right to exist in this landscape, has replaced the conquering attitude many bring to wilderness experiences. You don't seek to master this place or bend it to human will. You seek instead to find your niche within it, to adapt yourself to its requirements rather than changing it to suit your preferences. As winter approaches again, you complete the now familiar preparations with increased efficiency. What once took months now requires weeks. Gathering firewood, harvesting and preserving food, preparing equipment, winterizing the cabin. Experience has made you more effective, able to anticipate needs and solve problems before they become critical. The first substantial snow falls in early October, earlier than the previous year. Within days, the landscape returns to its winter form, white, simplified, stark in its beauty. The lakes freeze quickly, first along the edges, then spreading toward the center until the entire surface becomes solid. You've come to appreciate winter's austere beauty, its reduction of life to essentials, the sensory overload of summer, constant light, explosive growth, cacophony of bird calls, riot of colours and scents, gives way to something more fundamental. White snow, blue sky, green spruce, black water moving beneath ice, basic elements, primary colors, the world distilled to its core components. By November, darkness again dominates the daily cycle. You've adjusted your activities accordingly, using the brief daylight for outdoor tasks, reserving the long evenings for indoor projects illuminated by firelight and the efficient oil lamps you've refined over the years. The winter solstice, December 21st, marks the darkest day, but also the turning point. You acknowledge it with a small celebration, allowing yourself extra rations of coffee and the last preserved blueberries, a taste of summer in the depths of winter. That night, a spectacular aurora fills the sky, curtains of green and purple light dancing above the mountains. You stand outside despite the biting cold, head tilted back in wonder at the display. No matter how many times you witness this phenomenon, it never fails to inspire awe. As the lights shimmer overhead, you reflect on the journey that brought you here, from a conventional life of mechanical work, schedules, and modern conveniences to this deliberate existence of self-reliance, observation, and direct engagement with natural processes. Many would see your choice as deprivation, focusing on what you've given up: electricity, plumbing, easy access to goods and services, regular human companionship. But from where you stand, gazing at the cosmic light show overhead, it feels like abundance. You've gained something far more valuable than convenience: authenticity, purpose, a life aligned with your deepest values. The aurora gradually fades, stars emerging in its wake to fill the black dome of sky. You return to the cabin's warmth, adding wood to the fire before settling into your handmade chair with journal and pencil. December 21st, 1970, you write, "Shortest day, spectacular aurora this evening, best of the year, temp, 20 degree found at sunset, Wolverine tracks crossed from East Ridge to Lakeshore, probably same individual from last month based on gait pattern, 4 ravens at dusk roosting in large spruce near creek mouth." These detailed observations, recorded day after day, year after year, will eventually comprise one of the most comprehensive records of wilderness life ever created. But that's not why you maintain the journal. You write because observing and recording has become part of how you make sense of the world, how you process your place within it. As you drift towards sleep, the fire burning low on the hearth, you feel a contentment that has nothing to do with comfort in the conventional sense. Your back aches from hauling wood, your hands are calloused and chapped. The cabin, for all its craftsmanship, remains a simple shelter against extreme elements. Yet there's a deep satisfaction in this life you've built, in the direct relationship between effort and outcome. No artificial metrics of success, no abstract rewards, just the concrete reality of needs identified and met through your own skill and labor. The years stretch ahead, each bringing its cycle of challenge and fulfillment, hardship and beauty. You'll remain at Twin Lakes until 1999, more than 30 years of solitary wilderness living. Your journals, films, and photographs will inspire countless others to consider their own relationship with the natural world, to question the necessity of modern complications, to seek authenticity in their choices. But that lies in the future. For now, there's only this moment. The warmth of shelter against winter cold, the satisfaction of skills well honed, the quiet joy of a life deliberately chosen rather than passively accepted. As your own eyelids grow heavy, consider what draws us to stories like Proenike's. Perhaps it's recognition of something essential we've lost in our convenience-obsessed culture, direct connection to natural processes, the satisfaction of self-reliance, the clarity that comes from distinguishing between wants and needs. Sleep now, surrounded by your modern comforts, but perhaps carrying a small spark of wilderness wisdom into your dreams, the understanding that the most meaningful life may not be the easiest, that some forms of hardship contain their own unique rewards, that stepping away from convenience occasionally allows us to step towards something more authentic. Tomorrow night we'll continue exploring the remarkable journey of a man who chose a different path, who found abundance in simplicity and connection in solitude. By mid-1970s, Dick Proenica wasn't just surviving in the Alaskan wilderness, he was thriving in it. What had started as a bold experiment had evolved into a way of life so natural it seemed he'd never lived any other way. The cabin, once just shelter, had become an extension of himself. Each log, each nail, each carefully crafted piece of furniture bore the mark of his hands and his vision. In the years since he'd built it, the structure had weathered into the landscape, moss growing between the logs, the wood developing a silver patina that blended with the surrounding forest. Dawn breaks over Twin Lakes. It's 1975, and you've been living here for 7 years now. The morning routine has long since become second nature. Stoke the fire from banked coals, melt snow for water, prepare a simple breakfast of sourdough pancakes and strong black coffee. Another day in paradise, you murmur, stepping outside to check the weather. The thermometer reads 15 below zero, mild for January in this region. The sky stretches clear and blue above snow-covered mountains, promising good conditions for the day's planned activities. After breakfast, you gather your tools for the project you've been contemplating for weeks. Crafting a new door for the cache. The elevated storage structure that keeps your food safe from marauding animals. The original door, while functional, has begun to warp from years of temperature extremes. Like everything at Twin Lakes, it requires maintenance, improvement, replacement when necessary. Nothing here is permanent except the land itself. You work outside despite the cold, hands protected by mittens except when fine control is needed. The rhythmic sound of your saw-cutting spruce fills the clear air. There's satisfaction in this work, tangible, purposeful, directly connected to your well-being. No artificial deadlines, no arbitrary standards, just the honest assessment of what needs doing and the skill to accomplish it. By midday, the new door is taking shape. You've incorporated improvements based on experience, better weather stripping, a more secure latch, slight adjustments to the dimensions for easier operation in extreme cold. This constant refinement, this evolution of design through practical use, characterizes all your projects. A movement catches your eye, a familiar red fox trotting along the lakeshore, nose to ground as it follows some scent trail invisible to human perception. Without conscious thought, you reach for your camera, always kept loaded and ready. Documenting wildlife has become more than hobby. It's a primary focus of your wilderness life. Over the years, you've accumulated thousands of feet of film and countless still photographs, a visual record that complements your meticulous journals. The animals that share this landscape have become subjects of intense study. You know individual wolves by their tracks, can recognize specific bears by their gait, have mapped the territories of foxes and martens with scientific precision. The fox pauses, seeming to sense observation despite being downwind. It looks directly toward you, then deliberately continues its hunting. This is a young male you've watched since it was a kit, now establishing its own range near your cabin. Not tame, but habituated to human presence in a way that speaks to your careful, respectful coexistence. After finishing the day's work on the door, you strap on snowshoes for the daily trek to check snares. Hunting with gun or bow provides most of your meat, but the small wire snares set for snowshoe hares supplement your diet during winter months when other food sources grow scarce. The trail through deep powder takes you through spruce forest, then along a ridge offering commanding views of both lakes. You stop frequently, not from fatigue, but to observe. A bull moose forages in willows near the shore, its massive rack casting complex shadows on the snow. Ravens circle overhead, their throaty calls echoing against mountain walls. Wind creates subtle patterns in snow, revealing physics principles more elegantly than any textbook. 2 of the 5 snares hold hares, enough for several meals. You collect them with a murmured thanks, acknowledging the exchange that sustains your life. Nothing is taken for granted here, no resource used without appreciation for its gift. Back at the cabin by late afternoon, you process the hares with practiced efficiency. The meat will become stew tonight, then perhaps jerky for trail food. The hides join others stretching on frames, eventually to become mittens or hat linings. Bones go into the broth pot for minerals and flavor. Even the entrails have purpose, left at a distance from the cabin where they'll feed ravens and foxes, maintaining the cycle of energy through different forms. As daylight fades, still brief in January despite lengthening by minutes each day, you settle into evening activities. The journals come first, detailed entries recording weather conditions, wildlife observations, daily activities. These records, maintained without fail since your arrival, have acquired scientific value beyond personal documentation. January 17th, 1975, you write. Clear, calm, 15-degree eve at dawn, warming to 6 degrees by midday. Finished new cache door, significant improvement over original design. 2 hares in snares along East Ridge. Wolf pack, 6 individuals, crossed Lower Lake heading north around noon. Based on track patterns, appears to be same pack observed last week. Bull moose feeding at northwest willow stand shows signs of tick irritation, rubbing against trees frequently. After journal entries come other projects that fill winter evenings, carving wooden utensils, repairing equipment, fashioning tools from available materials. You've become extraordinarily self-sufficient, able to create or repair almost anything needed for wilderness living. But perhaps the most significant evening activity is reflection, the quiet contemplation that extended isolation both allows and encourages. Without modern distractions, without constant human interaction, your thoughts have room to develop fully, to follow complex paths, to reach conclusions based on direct experience rather than external influence. This mental clarity, this philosophical dimension of wilderness living has become as important as physical survival skills. You're not just living in nature, you're developing a coherent worldview based on immersion in natural systems, on first-hand observation of life uncomplicated by artificial constructs. One evening, as aurora lights dance across the northern sky, you write in your journal, "I have found that some of the simplest things have given me the most pleasure. They didn't cost me a lot of money either. They just worked on my senses. Did you ever pick very large blueberries after a summer rain, walk through a grove of cottonwoods open like a park and see the blue sky beyond the shimmering gold of the leaves, pull on dry woolen socks after you've peeled off the wet ones? The world is full of such things." This observation, simple yet profound, captures the essence of what you've discovered during your years at Twin Lakes. Happiness derived not from acquisition or accomplishment as conventionally defined, but from sensory presence, from direct engagement with the world's inherent beauty. As the 1970s progress, your lifestyle attracts increasing attention. The book One Man's Wilderness, based on your journals and published in 1973, finds receptive audience among people questioning modern society's direction. Your film footage, edited into documentaries, reaches even wider viewership through television broadcasts. This attention brings changes to your previously solitary existence. Visitors begin arriving during summer months. Journalists, photographers, admirers seeking to experience briefly what you live daily. Most come by float plane for day trips, but some stay longer, camping near the cabin, learning what they can of your wilderness knowledge. You receive these visitors with mixed feelings. The human connection is welcome after weeks of solitude, but the intrusions disrupt wildlife patterns and challenge your carefully established routines. You develop a gracious but firm approach, welcoming genuine interest, sharing knowledge freely, but maintaining boundaries that protect both your privacy and the wilderness integrity that drew you here. Among frequent visitors are National Park Service personnel. In 1978, President Jimmy Carter designates the area, including Twin Lakes, as Lake Clark National Monument under the Antiquities Act, a precursor to its establishment as Lake Clark National Park and Preserve in 1980. This designation brings both reassurance and concern. The land's protected status means it will remain undeveloped, preserved for future generations, a goal aligned with your own values. But official designation also means increased oversight, regulations, potential limitations on traditional activities like hunting and trapping. You navigate this transition carefully, developing collaborative relationships with Park Service officials who recognize your unparalleled knowledge of the area and respect your low-impact lifestyle. Rather than opposing the designation, you become an unofficial steward, helping document sensitive areas, reporting poachers or irresponsible visitors, providing historical and ecological information that shapes management decisions. Your relationship with the land itself deepens with each passing season. What began as appreciation has evolved into intimate knowledge of every ridge and valley, every creek and marsh, every subtle ecosystem within your expanded territory. You move through this landscape not as visitor but as participant, reading its signs with the fluency of long practice. Weather prediction becomes almost instinctive, not through mystical connection, but through thousands of observed correlations between cloud patterns, wind direction, animal behavior, and subsequent conditions. Your accuracy would put modern meteorologists to shame, based not on satellite data, but on the accumulated wisdom of daily observation. Plant knowledge expands beyond simple identification to understanding complex growth patterns, relationships between species, medicinal and nutritional properties. You know precisely when each edible variety will emerge, peak and decline, knowledge essential for efficient gathering and preservation. Animal behavior becomes so familiar that deviations immediately signal your attention. When a wolf pack changes its usual route, you consider what might have altered territorial boundaries. When bears emerge from hibernation earlier than typical, you note environmental factors that might explain the shift. This depth of knowledge isn't abstract or academic. It's practical, immediate, directly relevant to daily life. Understanding the land means living successfully within it, adapting to its patterns rather than imposing human expectations onto natural systems. By the 1980s, you've achieved a level of wilderness competence few modern humans can claim. The skills that once required conscious effort have become instinctual. The challenges that once seemed daunting now handled with efficient ease. Your body, though aging, remains remarkably fit, lean and weathered from constant activity, capable of physical feats that would exhaust men decades younger. Daily life follows seasonal rhythms. Spring means intensive gardening in the small plot you've developed, fishing in newly thawed waters, collecting the first edible plants that emerge from melting snow. Summer brings abundant berries, midnight sun for extended projects. exploration of more distant areas by boat and on foot. Fall focuses on hunting, wood gathering, preservation of food for winter months. Winter brings trapping, indoor projects, reflection during the long, dark hours. These cycles provide structure without rigidity, purpose without artificial pressure. Unlike modern schedules dictated by clocks and calendars, your activities flow naturally from environmental conditions and genuine needs. There's urgency when circumstances demand. A storm approaching, game that must be processed before spoiling, but never the arbitrary deadlines that create stress without purpose. Visitors often comment on your apparent contentment, the centered calmness that characterizes your interactions despite challenging living conditions. This quality stems not from philosophical abstraction, but from direct experience, the discovery that aligning with natural rhythms brings satisfaction deeper than convenience, that self-reliance creates security more fundamental than wealth. The problem with living in the modern world, you tell a documentary filmmaker who visits during summer 1985, isn't that it's too difficult. It's that it's difficult in ways that don't make sense. Artificial problems, artificial solutions. Out here, every challenge is real. When you solve it, the satisfaction is real too. This perspective, gained through decades of wilderness living, offers critique of contemporary society not through academic analysis, but through lived alternative. Your existence demonstrates possibilities most have forgotten, that humans can live simply without suffering, can meet basic needs without complex systems, can find fulfillment outside consumer culture. Yet you're no anti-technology zealot, no primitive skills reenactor rejecting all modern tools. Your cabin contains carefully selected items from the industrial world. Your camera equipment, a small radio, well-crafted tools that serve specific purposes. You've created a thoughtful hybrid using technology where it genuinely enhances life without becoming dependent on complex systems beyond your control. This selective approach extends to social connections as well. While choosing physical isolation, you maintain relationships through letters, occasional radio communications, visits from friends. Your withdrawal from society isn't rejection of humanity, but creation of space for different relationship with both people and natural world. Connections based on quality rather than quantity, on depth rather than convenience. By the late 1980s, your reputation has grown beyond niche wilderness enthusiasts to broader public awareness. The documentaries featuring your footage air repeatedly on public television, introducing viewers nationwide to your remarkable lifestyle. Letters arrive from people inspired by your example, questioning their own life choices, seeking wisdom from your experience. You answer these letters thoughtfully but without presumption, aware that your path isn't universally applicable, that each person must find their own authentic relationship with both wilderness and civilization. You offer observations rather than prescriptions, examples rather than rules. I think it's good for people to do hard things sometimes, you write to one correspondent. Not pointless hardship, but challenges that teach you something about yourself, about what you actually need versus what you just want because everyone else has it. This distinction between authentic needs and culturally created wants forms the core of wisdom gleaned through your wilderness years. The simplified life at Twin Lakes has stripped away layers of assumption about what constitutes necessity, revealing just how little is genuinely required for human fulfillment. Your tiny cabin, barely 200 square feet, contains everything essential for comfortable living. Your possessions fit within that space with room to spare. Your food comes directly from the land through your own effort. Your entertainment derives from natural beauty, from creative projects, from the satisfaction of skills well applied. This radical simplicity challenges conventional assumptions about standard of living, about what constitutes success or comfort. Visitors sometimes express pity for your primitive conditions until they recognize the contentment that permeates your existence, the absence of the stress they consider normal, the presence of purpose in even small daily activities. "I don't feel like I'm giving anything up," you explain to a park ranger who asks about sacrifices wilderness living entails. "Feels more like I've gotten rid of clutter, physical stuff, mental noise, social complications that weren't adding anything real." This perspective, that simplicity represents gain rather than loss, reverses conventional wisdom. Your daily life demonstrates that reduced consumption can increase satisfaction, that self-imposed limits can create freedom, that stepping away from convenience can enhance capability. As you move into your third decade at Twin Lakes, the physical challenges of wilderness living become more noticeable. You're in your 70s now, still remarkably fit but aware of changing capacities. Winter cold penetrates more deeply. Heavy loads require more recovery time. Projects take longer to complete. Yet adaptation continues. You modify techniques to accommodate physical changes, develop tools that leverage mechanical advantage, adjust routines to conserve energy for essential tasks. The wisdom accumulated through decades of problem solving applies now to the challenge of aging in a demanding environment. Through it all, your journals continue, daily entries recording not just activities and observations, but evolving perspectives on this unique life experiment. The thousands of pages filled with your precise handwriting constitute one of the most comprehensive records of wilderness living ever created, valuable not just as personal narrative, but as historical and scientific documentation. August the 1st, 1989, wind kicked up early, creating whitecaps on the lower lake. Allsworth flew in with mail and supplies around noon, reported unusual dry conditions further south. Blueberries reaching peak ripeness on south-facing slopes gathered 4 quarts from the best patches. Wolfpack, now 7 members with new pups, visible on far shore in evening light. 21 years at Twin Lakes today. Hard to believe so much time has passed. Feels like I just arrived, yet also like I've always been here. This paradoxical relationship with time, simultaneously fleeting and expansive, characterizes your wilderness experience. Without artificial markers dividing existence into segments, without the acceleration that comes from constant novelty and distraction, time moves differently. Days might pass slowly in their individual experience, but years accumulate with startling speed, marked by natural cycles rather than arbitrary milestones. As darkness falls, coming earlier now in late summer than during June's endless daylight, you sit outside watching stars emerge above mountain silhouettes, the simple wooden chair beneath you, the cabin at your back, the landscape stretching before you, all represent choice made and commitment honored, path taken despite difficulty, life lived according to personal truth rather than external expectation. In this moment of quiet reflection, you recognize something that visitors often miss when romanticizing your lifestyle. The true value of these wilderness years lies not in dramatic survival challenges or scenic beauty, though both exist in abundance. It lies instead in the integrity of direct relationship with natural world, with your own capabilities, with fundamental rather than artificial needs. You've created a life that makes sense on its own terms, that needs no external validation, that answers to reality rather than convention. In a world increasingly removed from natural processes, increasingly mediated through technology and abstraction, this represents radical authenticity. Meanwhile, your eyes grow heavy as you read this story, perhaps feeling the pull of simpler existence even as modern comforts surround you. There's something compelling about Proenike's wilderness life that resonates beyond romantic notions of escape, something that speaks to deeper human needs for purpose, for direct engagement, for connection with natural rhythms we've evolved alongside for millennia. Sleep now. Tomorrow night we'll continue exploring the remarkable journey of a man who chose different path through life, creating meaning through simplicity and discovering abundance in enough rather than excess. Weather in the Alaskan wilderness isn't something you check on your phone before deciding whether to bring an umbrella. It's the difference between life and death. Nobody learned this better than Dick Proenike during his decades at Twin Lakes. The weather wasn't just an inconvenience or a topic of small talk, it was the most powerful force in his daily existence, capable of transforming survival from routine to desperate struggle in minutes. It's February 1991 and the thermometer outside your cabin reads 63 degrees below zero, not wind chill, actual temperature, the kind of cold that doesn't just freeze water, it freezes mercury, the kind of cold where spit crystallizes before hitting the ground, where exhaled breath creates a crackling sound as moisture instantly turns to ice crystals. "Your record breaker," you mutter, your voice strangely muffled in the dense, frigid air. You've been at Twin Lakes for 23 years now, and while 50 below temperatures are common enough in winter, this is exceptional even by Alaskan standards. The challenge of extreme cold is total. Everything, absolutely everything, is affected. Metal becomes brittle enough to shatter when struck. Wood contracts, creating new gaps in the cabin's careful construction. Stored food turns rock solid, requiring thawing before preparation. Even the simple act of urination becomes dangerous if attempted too close to the cabin. The stream freezes so quickly it can create a hazardous ice slick. Inside, you've maintained a habitable temperature through constant feeding of the fireplace. The fire can never go out during these cold snaps. Doing so would allow the cabin interior to plummet to matching outside temperatures within hours. You sleep in short stretches, waking every 2 hours to add wood, checking that the flames haven't died down too far. The physical toll is considerable. Your body burns calories at an astonishing rate just maintaining core temperature. Despite eating nearly twice your normal food intake, you've lost weight during this cold spell. Every trip outside, even briefly to gather firewood from the stack against the cabin wall, requires full Arctic gear, layers of wool and down, face protection, heavy mittens over gloves. Yet there's a strange beauty to this extreme cold, an otherworldly quality to the landscape. Sound travels with supernatural clarity. You can hear trees cracking from the internal freeze of sap, a sharp report like gunfire despite being hundreds of yards away. The air is so clear that distant mountains seem close enough to touch, every detail of snow-covered ridges visible with startling precision. The aurora displays during these cold snaps are beyond description, curtains of green, purple and blue light dancing across the sky, so bright they cast shadows on the snow. You've watched them for hours, despite the brutal temperature, bundled in every layer you own, unable to tear yourself away from the cosmic spectacle overhead. But extreme cold is only one of the wilderness challenges you've mastered during your decades at Twin Lakes. The weather here exists in extremes. Searing summer heat can follow brutal winter cold, with each season bringing unique survival tests. Summer storms sweep across the lakes with shocking speed, turning placid water into life-threatening waves within minutes. You've been caught on the open water more than once, your small boat suddenly inadequate against nature's fury, requiring all your strength and skill to reach shore safely. During one memorable July thunderstorm in the mid-80s, you watched from your cabin doorway as lightning struck a spruce tree about 50 yards away, the electrical charge traveling visibly down the trunk before exploding outward at ground level, sending bark and wood fragments flying. The thunder was instantaneous and deafening, felt more than heard, reverberating in your chest like a physical blow. "Too close for comfort," you wrote in your journal afterward, noting with scientific precision the exact location, time, and observable effects. Even in moments of danger, your observer's eye remains sharp, documenting events with the detachment that has made your journals so valuable to researchers. Fire danger during dry summers creates a different kind of stress. The ecosystem needs occasional burns for renewal, but a forest fire threatening your cabin would mean the loss of everything you've built. You maintain a defensive perimeter, clearing combustible material from around your structures, keeping barrels of water ready during the highest risk periods. In 1977, a lightning-caused fire on the far side of the upper lake filled the air with smoke for weeks, obscuring the sun and forcing you to remain indoors during the worst days. The fire never jumped the lake to threaten your cabin directly, but the experience reinforced the power of natural forces and the limits of human control, even for someone as prepared as yourself. Flooding presents yet another seasonal hazard. Spring breakup, when winter ice melts and snow-swollen streams overflow their banks, can transform familiar terrain into unrecognizable waterscapes. The cabin site was carefully chosen on higher ground, but your garden and some outbuildings have been damaged during particularly severe flood years. You've learned to read the signs that precede these events: unusually rapid temperature increases that accelerate snowmelt, ice jams forming at river bends, certain cloud patterns that indicate heavy rain approaching. This environmental literacy, developed through years of careful observation, allows preparation before disaster strikes. But perhaps the most persistent weather challenge is the unrelenting wind that can blow for days without ceasing. Summer or winter, these wind events test both physical structures and mental resilience. The constant sound, sometimes a low moan, sometimes a shrieking howl, makes sleep difficult, communication impossible, and outdoor work dangerous as flying debris becomes a serious hazard. During one particularly violent November storm, sustained winds of over 70 miles per hour tore the door from your woodshed, damaged the roof of your cache, and toppled trees throughout the surrounding forest. You spent the entire event inside the cabin, listening to the cacophony outside, periodically checking through the window to ensure your critical structures remained intact. The aftermath required weeks of cleanup and repair, another lesson in humility before natural forces. No matter how well built your structures, how carefully planned your preparations, the wilderness can always deliver challenges beyond human anticipation. Yet, these weather extremes, while potentially deadly, aren't the only survival challenges you faced during your Twin Lakes decades. Wildlife encounters have provided some of the most immediate threats to personal safety. Bears, particularly grizzlies, represent the most obvious danger. You've developed a deep respect for these massive predators, understanding their behavior patterns and territory markers well enough to avoid most problematic encounters. But occasionally, confrontation becomes unavoidable. One autumn morning in the early 1980s, you rounded a bend while hiking a familiar trail and came face to face with a large male grizzly less than 30 feet away. The bear, as surprised as you, rose to its hind legs, not charging but assessing the situation from its full 9-foot height. Time seemed to stop in that moment. Your rifle, always carried during wilderness travel, remained pointed at the ground. Shooting would be absolute last resort, likely to result in your own injury or death unless immediately fatal to the bear, something unlikely even for someone with your marksmanship skills. Instead, you spoke calmly, letting the animal know you were human, not prey. You made yourself appear larger by spreading your arms, but avoided direct eye contact that might be interpreted as challenge. Most importantly, you gave the bear an escape route, stepping carefully to one side of the trail. After what felt like hours, but was probably less than a minute, the bear dropped to all fours, gave a dismissive huff, and ambled into the underbrush. Only when it was completely out of sight did you allow yourself to exhale fully, heart still pounding from adrenaline. Close encounters like that remind you where you stand in the food chain, you wrote that evening. Not at the top, whatever we humans might think, just another animal trying to make its way, same as the rest. This philosophy, seeing yourself as participant rather than master in the natural order, has guided your wildlife interactions. You carry protection, remain vigilant, but approach each encounter with respect rather than fear or dominance. This attitude has served you well, allowing coexistence with creatures that many would consider intolerable threats. Wolves, while less immediately dangerous to humans than bears, present their own challenges. During especially harsh winters when game becomes scarce, wolf packs have occasionally approached uncomfortably close to your cabin, drawn by the scent of stored food or the smaller animals that gather near your clearings. You've never had direct confrontation with these intelligent predators, but their nighttime howling just beyond the firelight's reach, their tracks circling your structures in the morning snow, create a primal awareness of vulnerability that modern humans rarely experience. It's not fear exactly, but acute consciousness of being potentially prey rather than unquestioned apex predator. Health emergencies represent perhaps the most serious survival challenge in such isolated conditions, with the nearest medical facility hundreds of miles away, accessible only by plane in good weather. Even minor injuries or illnesses can escalate to life-threatening situations. You've developed extensive wilderness first aid knowledge, both preventive and reactive. Your cabin contains a carefully maintained medical kit with supplies ordered through Babe Allsworth's regular deliveries. You've studied plant-based remedies from both scientific and traditional knowledge sources, testing and documenting their effectiveness for various common ailments. But knowledge and preparation can only go so far. When you severely gashed your leg with an axe while splitting wood in the winter of 1978, the situation quickly became critical. Blood loss in sub-zero temperatures, combined with the physical challenge of returning to the cabin while injured, created compounding survival threats. You applied direct pressure with a clean bandana, elevated the leg as much as possible while moving, and focused on reaching shelter before shock or hypothermia could set in. Once inside, proper cleaning, butterfly bandages, and careful monitoring prevented infection. But the incident highlighted the razor-thin margin between routine accident and potential disaster. Less dramatic but equally serious was the bout of food poisoning that left you incapacitated for nearly a week during a particularly harsh January. unable to maintain the fire properly, gather water, or prepare food, you experienced firsthand how quickly physical debilitation can threaten survival in wilderness conditions. When you're alone, there's zero margin for error, you explained to a visiting park ranger years later. Something that would mean a day in bed with someone bringing you soup in town could be a death sentence out here if it hits at the wrong time or lasts too long. This reality that minor mishaps can cascade into life-threatening scenarios shapes every aspect of your wilderness behavior. You've developed habits of meticulous care, redundant systems, and worst-case planning that might seem paranoid in civilization but represent essential wisdom in isolation. Tools are maintained with religious dedication, cutting edges kept razor sharp, moving parts properly lubricated, spares created for critical items. Food is stored in multiple caches, ensuring that damage to one supply wouldn't mean complete loss. Alternative methods exist for every essential task, allowing adaptation when primary approaches fail due to conditions or equipment issues. Mental challenges often prove as formidable as physical ones in long-term wilderness living. The isolation that many find refreshing during brief wilderness experiences can become oppressive during winter's extended darkness, when weather conditions might prevent outside activities for days or even weeks at a stretch. You've developed psychological strategies to match your physical preparations. The journals provide structure and purpose, a daily commitment regardless of conditions. Creative projects, carving, tool making, planning future improvements occupy mind and hands during confinement. The small library of books brought in by plane, read and reread, each volume extracting new insights with each revisiting. Radio provides intermittent connection to the outside world, though reception varies with atmospheric conditions. The occasional voice emerging from static creates a tenuous link to humanity during periods when actual human contact might be months away. You listen to news broadcasts with the detached interest of an anthropologist studying distant cultures, the concerns of modern society increasingly foreign to your experience. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of your wilderness adaptation is the transformation of hardship from enemy to teacher. What began as survival challenges to be overcome have become opportunities for deeper understanding, for refinement of both practical skills and philosophical perspective. The extreme cold that initially seemed merely an obstacle to comfort has revealed lessons about energy conservation, about the physics of heat transfer, about the remarkable adaptations of plants and animals to Arctic conditions. The violent storms that once created only anxiety now provide insights into atmospheric patterns, into the interconnected nature of weather systems across vast regions. Even encounters with predators, potentially deadly as they remain, have evolved from simple threat to complex relationship, recognition that humans exist within rather than separate from natural systems, that intelligent coexistence requires respect rather than dominance. This perspective extends to resource use as well. Your relationship with the land has become increasingly nuanced over the decades, taking what's needed for survival while ensuring regeneration, understanding that short-term convenience often conflicts with long-term sustainability. When hunting, you've developed almost ceremonial mindfulness, taking only what's necessary, using every part possible, acknowledging the exchange of one life to sustain another. This isn't abstract environmentalism, but practical ethics emerging from direct participation in natural cycles. I've come to understand that everything here is connected in ways that aren't obvious until you stay in one place long enough, watching through complete cycles, you explain to a documentary filmmaker during a rare summer visit. Take too many fish from one spot, you'll have fewer eagles next year. Too many berries from one hillside and the bears change their patterns. It's all linked. This ecological wisdom, earned through decades of close observation rather than theoretical study, has practical applications but also profound philosophical implications. The modern notion that humans stand apart from nature, that resources exist primarily for exploitation, seems increasingly foreign to your experience-based understanding. By 1990s, as you move into your third decade at Twin Lakes, the challenges remain, but your relationship with them has transformed. What once seemed like constant battle for survival has become something closer to dance, responding to the rhythms of weather and seasons with practiced grace, anticipating changes before they arrive, adapting to conditions rather than fighting against them. Winter storms that once created anxiety are now met with calm preparation. Extra firewood moved inside before the first snowflakes fall. Essential tools positioned for easy access regardless of external conditions. Cabin prepared for extended confinement with practiced efficiency. Summer's midnight sun, once disruptive to sleep patterns, has become opportunity for extended projects, for exploration of more distant areas, for gathering and preservation during peak abundance. The mosquitoes remain as fierce as ever, but you've refined protection methods and mental strategies for coexistence with this unavoidable aspect of northern summers. The physical challenges of aging have required their own adaptations. In your 70s now, you've modified techniques to accommodate changing capacities, leveraging mechanical advantage where once raw strength sufficed, adjusting daily routines to conserve energy for essential tasks, developing tools that extend capabilities while reducing physical strain. Yet the fundamental relationship remains unchanged. Direct engagement with natural systems, immediate feedback between action and consequence, life structured around genuine needs rather than artificial wants. The challenges have refined rather than defeated you, creating a life defined by capability rather than convenience, by adaptation rather than control. As night falls over Twin Lakes, you sit by the fire completing the day's journal entry. Outside, aurora lights dance across the northern sky, their eerie glow reflecting off snow-covered landscape. The temperature has dropped to 40 below, wind moaning around cabin corners, conditions that would be life-threatening to the unprepared. But inside this small shelter you built with your own hands, warmed by fire you fed with wood you gathered, nourished by food you hunted or harvested or preserved, you experience not deprivation but sufficiency, not isolation but self-reliance, not hardship but earned comfort. This, perhaps, is the most profound lesson from your decades in the wilderness, that challenge itself isn't enemy to contentment, but often its prerequisite, that capabilities developed through necessity create satisfaction unavailable through convenience, that direct engagement with fundamental realities offers fulfillment, modern comfort often fails to provide. As you close the journal and bank the fire for the night, preparing for sleep in the profound silence only possible in such remote places, there's awareness that each day remains uncertain, each season brings new challenges, each year requires continued adaptation. Yet there's also deep certainty that whatever comes, storm or calm, abundance or scarcity, ease or difficulty, you've developed the skills, knowledge, and perspective to meet it directly, to extract both practical solution and deeper wisdom from whatever challenges arise. Meanwhile, as your own eyelids grow heavy, consider what draws us to stories of wilderness survival, to accounts of lives lived at the edge of human capability. Perhaps it's recognition that modern comfort, for all its undeniable benefits, sometimes isolates us from the very experiences that develop our most meaningful capacities. Resilience, resourcefulness, direct relationship with natural systems. Sleep now, Tomorrow night brings the final chapter of our journey through the remarkable life of Richard Proeneke, a man who chose difficult path not from rejection of comfort, but from recognition that challenge itself offers rewards more profound than convenience alone can provide. All good things come to an end, even a life as extraordinary as Dick Proeneke's wilderness adventure. It's spring 1998, and you're watching a pair of loons glide across twin lakes. Their haunting calls echo off the mountains, a sound that's become as familiar to you as your own heartbeat over the past 30 years. The ice broke up early this year, revealing water so clear you can see trout swimming 20 feet below the surface. 30 years, you mutter, shaking your head at the impossible math of it all. How did that happen? You're 82 now, your body still remarkably strong but undeniably weathered by decades of wilderness living. The man who arrived at Twin Lakes in 1968 to build a cabin by hand exists now only in journal entries and film reels, the face that greets you in your small shaving mirror. Each morning tells the story of thousands of days in sun, wind, and bitter cold. Deeply lined, permanently tanned, eyes still sharp but set in a network of creases earned through years of squinting against snow glare. The calendar on your cabin wall is marked with a date circled in red, the day Babe Allsworth's son, Leon Jr., will fly in to help you close up the cabin for what you finally admitted will be the last time. The decision wasn't easy, but it was necessary. At 82, with winter temperatures regularly reaching 40 below and the nearest medical help hours away by plane, weather permitting, the risk has finally outgrown the reward. Your brother Raymond, Jake, the family, has been asking you to come live with him in California for years. You've always refused, unable to imagine trading this honest, direct existence for suburban life. But last winter brought a series of small warnings. A fall that could have been worse. Breathing troubles during a particularly cold snap, increasing difficulty maintaining the physical demands of survival as your strength, while still impressive, isn't what it once was. Better to leave on my own terms, you decided after careful consideration, while I still can. So today, you're preparing for departure, sorting through 3 decades of accumulated possessions, deciding what goes and what stays. The cabin and everything in it has been willed to the National Park Service, ensuring it will be preserved as you lived in it, a tangible record of what one man built with his own hands. The task is both practical and deeply emotional. Each object carries memories, represents skills developed, challenges overcome. The axe with its worn handle tells the story of countless trees felled, thousands of cords split for winter warmth. The fishing rod recalls summer evenings when trout rose to the surface like living jewels, providing meals so fresh they still quivered when placed in the pan. "What do you think, Sam?" you ask the red squirrel watching you from the woodpile. "Think the park rangers will appreciate all this?" The squirrel chips once, as if in agreement, then returns to its constant project of stealing and relocating small objects. This particular squirrel is at least the 4th generation descended from the original Sam you named when you first arrived, a lineage that has provided companionship and entertainment through countless seasons. The process of packing is simplified by the fact that you've always lived with minimal possessions. Only what served a purpose or brought genuine joy was worth hauling in by plane or keeping through seasonal relocations. The tools stay, they belong with the cabin, part of the story it tells. The journals go with you, thousands of pages filled with daily observations, the most complete record of your wilderness years. May 13th, 1998, you write in what will be your final Twin Lakes entry. Clear and 42 degrees at dawn, lake ice fully out except small sections along North Shore. Loons return to usual territory near cabin. 2 moose visible on far slope, still gaunt from winter but browsing new willows. Hard to believe this is my last spring here. 30 years of watching this same cycle of renewal, never exactly the same twice. Never thought the leaving would be harder than the coming, but there it is. The sound of an approaching plane interrupts your writing. You step outside, shading your eyes against the morning sun as Leon's familiar yellow float plane appears above the mountain ridge, banking gracefully before lining up for landing on the lake surface. This moment has played out hundreds of times over your decades here, the arrival of the small aircraft that served as your tenuous link to the outside world, bringing mail, supplies, occasional visitors, but this time carries different weight. When that plane leaves today, you'll be on it, looking down at Twin Lakes rather than waving from its shore. Leon taxis to your usual spot, cutting the engine as the plane drifts the last few yards to the beach. He's the son of your old friend Babe, who first flew you in back in '68, who supported your wilderness experiment with regular supply runs until his own passing. The son has inherited both his father's flying skills and his taciturn nature. "Ready?" he asks simply as he steps from the plane, understanding that extended conversation about the emotional significance of this departure isn't your style. "As I'll ever be," you reply, gesturing to the small pile of possessions ready for loading. Together you make short work of securing everything in the plane's cargo compartment. With that task complete, you ask for a few minutes alone for a final walk around the property that has been your home for more than half your life. The cabin stands solid as the day you finished it, though weathered to a silvery patina that blends with the surrounding landscape. Every log, every notch, every carefully fitted piece represents hours of labor, problems solved, skills applied. You built it to last, and it has a testament to craftsmanship in an age of disposable construction. The cache where you stored food safe from bears still stands on its tall legs. The woodshed remains stocked for the next occupant. The handmade furniture waits inside as if you might return by evening. Only the garden shows signs of abandonment, already being reclaimed by native plants in the few weeks since you stopped maintaining it. You make a slow circuit of the clearing, saying silent goodbyes to specific trees, rocks, views that have become more familiar than any human face over the past 3 decades. The mountains that once seemed imposingly foreign now feel like old friends, each ridge and valley known intimately through thousands of observations in all seasons and weather conditions. A movement catches your eye, a fox watching from the forest edge, its red coat bright against green undergrowth. Not the same individual you've observed over recent years, but perhaps its offspring. It watches with that same curious assessment that characterizes so many of your wildlife encounters, neither fearful nor friendly, simply aware. "Take care of the place," you tell it quietly before turning back toward the waiting plane. Leon has gone aboard already, giving you privacy for these final moments. You take one last look at the cabin, the lake, the mountains beyond, committing the scene to memory, even though thousands of similar views already exist in your mental catalogue. Then, with the same deliberate movement that has characterized your wilderness decades, you step into the float plane and close the door. The engine roars to life, vibrating through the aircraft frame as Leon expertly maneuvers away from shore. The takeoff is smooth, the plane lifting from the water surface and climbing in a wide arc that provides a sweeping view of your wilderness home. From this height you can see the entire Twin Lakes basin, the upper and lower lakes connected by the stream where you fished countless meals, the surrounding mountains still capped with snow despite the spring thaw, the tiny clearing where your cabin stands barely visible among vast stretches of unbroken wilderness. The perspective brings both emotional weight and strange comfort. From above, the cabin that represented your entire world for 30 years appears almost insignificant against the landscape's enormous scale. Yet this doesn't diminish your experience, it contextualizes it, places your human story within the larger narrative of this ancient place that existed long before you arrived and will continue long after you've gone. As the plane banks toward the mountain pass that leads to civilization, a certainty settles over you. Though you're leaving physically, part of you will always remain at Twin Lakes, embedded in the cabin logs, the trails you established, the land you tended, and more importantly, the land has become embedded in you, its rhythms, its demands, its beauty now inseparable from your identity. "Get what you came for?" Leon asks over the engine noise, his eyes fixed on the flight path ahead. You consider the question, its simplicity belying its depth. Did you get what you came for? The original plan was just 1 year, to see if you could do it, to experience all 4 seasons, to test your skills and document the process. That year stretched to 30, almost without conscious decision, each season flowing into the next until the experience became not an experiment, but a life. "Got a hell of a lot more than I came for," you answer finally, watching the mountains slide beneath the wings. "More than I ever expected." The transition back to civilization isn't easy. You move in with your brother Jake in Hemet, California, adjusting to life with electricity running water, neighbors just yards away rather than miles, cars, television, supermarkets, small talk about weather that doesn't determine survival. Everything feels simultaneously familiar and deeply foreign. The climate alone requires significant adaptation. After decades in Alaska's extremes, Southern California's mild temperatures and lack of seasonal variation seem almost unnatural. Your body, finely tuned to respond to wilderness challenges, finds little that demands its hard-earned capabilities. Yet you adapt because that's what you've always done. Observe conditions, adjust approaches, find solutions to new problems. The skills that served in wilderness prove surprisingly applicable to this new environment, not in their specific techniques, but in their underlying mindset of flexibility, patience, and practical problem solving. You establish routines that maintain connection to natural rhythms despite suburban surroundings, rising with the sun, walking daily regardless of weather, preparing simple meals from basic ingredients rather than processed alternatives. These habits form a bridge between your wilderness years and current circumstances, preserving what matters most from that experience. Public recognition of your unique life grows during these final years. The documentary Alone in the Wilderness, created from your own footage, airs on public television and finds enthusiastic audience nationwide. Your journals, edited and published in various forms, inspire readers with their detailed observations and quiet philosophy. The cabin at Twin Lakes becomes a pilgrimage site for wilderness enthusiasts, carefully preserved by the Park Service exactly as you left it. This attention brings mixed feelings. On one hand, there's satisfaction that your experiment in self-reliant living resonates with others, provides example of alternative to consumption-focused lifestyle. On the other hand, the solitude and direct experience that define Twin Lakes seems almost contradicted by becoming public figure, by having private life transformed into broadcast content. "Funny how things turn out," you remark to a documentary filmmaker who visits to interview you in California. "Spent 30 years trying to simplify my life, and now people want to make it complicated again by talking about it so much." Yet you engage with this interest graciously, recognizing genuine hunger for the values your wilderness years represent: self-reliance, connection to natural systems, life defined by purpose rather than convenience. Without preaching or self-importance, you share observations from your experience, letting others extract whatever meaning serves their own journey. What emerges most clearly in these reflections isn't romance about primitive living or rejection of modern benefits. It's more nuanced perspective, appreciation for technology that genuinely enhances life without creating dependency, recognition that convenience often comes at cost to capability, understanding that direct engagement with fundamental challenges provides satisfaction unavailable through mediation or outsourcing. The problem with modern life isn't that it's too easy, you explain to one interviewer. It's that it's difficult in ways that don't matter and easy in ways that do. We solve problems that aren't problems, then pay others to handle the things that would give us real satisfaction if we did them ourselves. This insight, earned through decades of direct experience rather than theoretical consideration, resonates deeply with audience increasingly aware of disconnection between technological progress and genuine well-being, between material accumulation and meaningful existence. Your health declines gradually as you move through your 80s, your body finally showing the effects of decades of physical demands and extreme conditions. Yet your mind remains sharp, your observations precise, your perspective clarified rather than diminished by advancing age. On April 20th, 2003, just 2 weeks shy of your 87th birthday, your remarkable journey ends peacefully in California, far from Twin Lakes in physical distance but carrying its essence within you until the very end. The legacy you leave extends far beyond the physical cabin that still stands at Twin Lakes. Your journals provide invaluable record of wilderness observations, climate data, wildlife patterns, plant cycles, documented with scientific precision across 3 decades. This information, especially given climate change impacts on northern regions, offers researchers baseline for understanding environmental shifts, otherwise unmeasurable. The films you created, initially intended just to show family what your life was like, have educated millions about wilderness values, traditional skills, simple living principles. Without didactic messaging or explicit environmentalism, these images convey deeper understanding of human relationship with natural world than many deliberate advocacy efforts. But perhaps your most significant legacy lies in the example provided by your choices, the demonstration that meaningful life doesn't require constant consumption, that purpose emerges from challenge rather than comfort, that direct engagement with fundamental processes brings satisfaction unavailable through convenience alone. This isn't rejection of modernity or romanticization of hardship. You appreciated technological tools that served genuine needs, recognized benefits of medical and communication advances, maintained connection to family and society despite physical distance. The wisdom emerges not in either or proposition, but in thoughtful discernment, using what enhances while avoiding what diminishes, choosing challenges that develop capability rather than difficulties that merely complicate. Visitors to Twin Lakes today find the cabin much as you left it, maintained by the National Park Service as both historical site and educational resource. The handmade furniture, the carefully designed storage solutions, the tools created for specific tasks, all remain in place, tangible evidence of human ingenuity applied to genuine needs. Rangers who guide these visits often report the same reaction from modern visitors: initial appreciation for the cabin's craftsmanship, followed by deeper realization of what the structure represents. Not just shelter in remote location, but physical embodiment of philosophy lived rather than merely discussed, deliberate choice about what's essential, what's enough, what constitutes life well lived. The The journals you kept so faithfully continue providing insights beyond their factual content. The detailed observations of animal behavior, weather patterns, plant cycles document not just wilderness conditions, but evolving relationship between human observer and natural systems. The development of environmental literacy that comes only through extended attentive presence in one place. Academics study these records for scientific data. Writers find inspiration in their clear, unpretentious style. Outdoor enthusiasts extract practical wisdom about wilderness living. But perhaps most valuable audience consists of ordinary people questioning their own relationship with consumption and convenience, seeking more authentic connection with natural processes, wondering whether modern progress always represents improvement. For these readers, your experience offers neither prescription nor rejection, but invitation to conscious consideration, to evaluate which conveniences enhance life and which merely separate from essential experiences, which technologies serve genuine needs, and which create artificial dependencies, which challenges develop meaningful capabilities, and which merely complicate without purpose. This nuanced perspective, neither romanticizing primitive conditions nor uncritically embracing every modern development, provides counterpoint to dominant narratives of either constant progress or idealized return to simpler past. The value lies not in either extreme, but in thoughtful discernment, in choices made with awareness of their full implications rather than by default or convention. Your legacy lives in physical artifacts, the cabin, tools, journals, films, but more significantly, it continues in lives influenced by your example, in choices made with greater awareness because you demonstrated alternatives, in appreciation for direct experience because you showed its value. Twin Lakes remains much as you knew it, the mountains unchanged in human time frame, the seasonal cycles continuing their ancient rhythm, wildlife following patterns established over evolutionary history. The cabin stands as human element within this landscape, significant to our perspective, but humble within greater context, influential but temporary, meaningful yet ultimately transitional. This proper proportion, human presence neither dominating nor inconsequential but appropriately scaled within natural systems, represents perhaps the most valuable insight from your wilderness decades. Not rejection of human activity, but its thoughtful integration. Not absence of impact, but consideration of its nature and extent. Not separation from nature, but conscious participation within it. As the years pass, new generations discover your story, find resonance in your choices, extract meaning relevant to contemporary challenges. The specific details of your wilderness life, the handmade cabin, the subsistence hunting, the physical isolation, may seem increasingly remote from modern experience, yet the underlying values translate across technological and cultural shifts. Self-reliance, direct engagement, thoughtful sufficiency, connection to natural systems, purpose through meaningful challenge. These principles, embodied in your daily choices rather than merely advocated, offer guidance that transcends the particular form of your wilderness experiment. The questions your life raises remain relevant regardless of setting or circumstance. What constitutes genuine need versus cultural expectation? Which difficulties develop capability and which merely complicate without purpose? What relationship with natural systems allows human flourishing without undermining their essential functions? How much is enough? What makes life meaningful beyond material accumulation? Your legacy isn't answers to these questions imposed on others, but demonstration that they can be explored through lived experience rather than abstract philosophy, that alternatives exist to unexamined cultural defaults, that meaningful life emerges from conscious choice rather than passive acceptance. And so, Richard Proenicke's remarkable journey continues, influencing lives long after his own ended, not through dogmatic prescription, but through authentic example, not by rejection of modernity, but through thoughtful engagement with its benefits and limitations, not by